All right, let's go ahead and call the order. City of Boynton Beach Planning Development Board meeting, Tuesday, January 25th. Come, you want to lead us with the pledge? Thank you very much.
All please rise. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, one under God, indivisible.
Thank you very much. Clerk, please, this is a roll call.
Rosecrans.
Here.
Butch.
present.
Chris Simon. Tim Litch.
Yes.
Kevin Fisher. Darren Allen.
Present.
Thomas Ramsey.
Present.
And as an alternate, I believe we have Jay Sobel.
Yes.
Also present for staff, Mike Rum, P&D Administrator, Amanda Radigan, and the City Attorney, James Sherlock.
Thank you very much. All right, I understand we might have some changes to the agenda. Go ahead and entertain those. Someone wants to begin?
Sure.
Thank you.
I move to move 7C up prior to 7A.
All right, a motion, anybody second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Minutes, approval of the minutes. We have a motion to approve them.
Hello.
Thank you very much. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Any announcements from the staff?
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike Rump, Planning and Zoning Administrator, indicating that first we did hear from board member Fisher. Sorry, that he would not be present tonight. We were notified. And secondly, we, as you know, we bring to you the outcome of items that have come before you that move on to the City Commission. And the two items are our sign code. The update of it in a comprehensive manner was approved by the Commission. And secondly, the Ruskin Avenue item, which involved annexation, land use, and rezoning, was also approved. That concludes the report.
Thank you very much for that. Any old business to discuss? I don't see anything here on the agenda, so we'll go ahead and move on to new business. 7C, approved WXEL request for future land use map amendment from recreation to office commercial and rezoning from recreation to office professional. Applicant is Gene H. Talley, South Florida PBS Incorporated.
You do have the applicant correct, and I am Bradley Miller with Urban Design Studio, their agent for this application. Is there a clicker?
Yes.
I'm actually very proud to represent WXEL, the South Florida PBS, which is located here on South Congress Avenue, broadcasting station for PBS TV. And I think all of us have experienced that at one point in time. It's been a long time, been a key part to the city of Boynton Beach. The odd thing is that we discovered as we were talking about this project that since 1989, the land use and the zoning has shown up as recreation instead of the office building. So what this application is for tonight is to change the land use and change the zoning to an office designation, which will, it's not part of this application, the site plan amendment that we're proposing, which I'll touch on, is actually a staff approval. but we need the land use and the zoning change really just to clean up the land use map and the zoning map to reflect the actual uses that are there. So this is showing what the map is showing now as recreational. We got no barrier park to the north and the tennis court from the city center to the north. Hunters Run is to the west, industrial to the east across Congress Avenue, and there in the red box is where WXEL exists today. So the change to the land use would be from recreational to office commercial, which would bring the use that's been there for 30 years to be consistent with the land use designation. The same follows that with the zoning, where we're requesting that it be changed from recreation to office professional for the same reasons. I had this discussion with staff, and I learned this through experience that it's hard to just present that when the 6 of you are going or 7 of you are going, but what's it gonna be? So what they're doing is, I can't show a site plan because we still have to go through that process, but they're adding on about a 7,000 square foot addition to the front of the building. It's gonna add some additional space that can be used by the community for different events. They can have recitals there. There's a studio area, so you can have art classes there. You can use it for gatherings, post-COVID gatherings, to go along with it. It just adds to it. And then there's a very cool part to it. That's this, I can never remember the name of it, but it's a dome. And if you've been to the Disney's and you see the dome in the 3D, they're putting one of those inside of here. So it's something that they can use for school field trips, for senior field trips. It's just going to be a great amenity to add on to the services that they already provide. So the reason I was actually the one who asked if we could make it short and sweet, because it is a short and sweet presentation to change it from the recreational land use and zoning into the office commercial. Here for any questions. We do have some representatives here from WXEL BDS South Florida.
We'll go ahead and open it up to the public for any questions right now. If you do wish to speak on this agenda item, please stand up and be sworn in by the city attorney. Oh boy, next one's gonna be a doozy then. All right, go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, a number of questions for you. The property is presently has a restriction on the deed, am I correct? And the restriction on the deed says it's to be used for, I believe, recreational, TV stations, and possibly, so first question is, the future creation of the Cultural Arts Center, is that consistent with the restriction on the deed? Somebody answer it? Please. Is the future Cultural Arts Center in compliance with the restriction on the deed?
Not being an attorney, I don't know if I can answer that myself. It is all still part of the broadcasting station there.
Okay.
So I think it's been reviewed that way. I got
that's fine.
As a chance to review it.
That's okay. I think you're right. So my question would be that I spent 10 years on the zoning board up north, which was a legal entity, wasn't an advisory board, 4 years as chairman. In all those years, we avoided spot zoning like an anathema. We would not spot zone a particular site to make it different than what's either on the north, south, or west side of it. On the north is a recreational area, on the south is a planned unit community, on the west is a planned unit community. So I'm asking a question. When I looked at this, why the staff is suggesting, couldn't you achieve everything you want? I understand it's a one-story building you're proposing. If we change the zoning, we then allow some future owner, if the station goes to have business, God forbid, they could come in there and they could build a something, an educational center, like the IBM center that closed down, educational, but it can be a 4-story building imposing on a planned community that has a 1-story home. I object to it. I think it is, I don't understand why the staff supported it. I don't see any reason for it. If we just grant them the variance to build what they build, there will be nothing that will restrict them from anything they want to do in compliance with the deed restriction. But we will never have to see a 3-story, 45 building sticking up there. So I would ask this board to vote no on this and have you come back and go to, maybe it's either this board or the zoning board, and ask for a zoning variance to achieve the end you want. I think every time we change zoning, it affects not the immediate people, but it's the future. And I think this would be a bad move for the future of that community, that area, and there's nothing to be gained by any of the residents around it or the property owner right now. So I, for one, am very much opposed to it. And I'd like to hear why we should do that rather than just have you go for a variance. And I understand that the original intent of the TV station was to get a variance. And the suggestion for changing zoning came from the staff. I have not discussed it with him, but I don't understand the rationale for this. So in sum and substance, I am strongly opposed to it.
Mike, does the city have any comment on some of this?
Yes, there's a couple issues that are relevant with respect to zoning. First, variance process in our regulations does not apply to uses. So you cannot get a variance to deviate from the zoning district. Under the current zoning, the use is non-conforming, even though there is this underlying deed restriction and history behind it. This is really the cleanest way to allow that expansion. It's a 30-foot height maximum in C1. So we'd be pushing it to go to a height that would be that much an anomaly. I could go on and talk about spot zoning, my professional theory and specifics on it and ideas behind it. If you look at it purely spot, yes, it's a different zoning district than those around it. But I think you really read case law or read textbooks on spot zoning, it talks about what the use is and is really different and stand out, different from the other ones. When you look at Congress Avenue Corridor, as staff has summarized in the report, you've got an array of uses. You've got residential, you've got multifamily, you've got recreation, you've got industrial, you've got the whole works. So if you look at the scheme of it, this does not represent one spot more than what other uses represent in the area. You can see there's two sides of that coin. I acknowledge what your history is.
If I might add one thing, please. The zoning on the west side of Congress is recreational, educational. On the east side of Congress is the industrial. But Congress is a very big street. It has no impact, really. Any of you drive up and down Congress, you know what's on one side has no impact on the other. Yet, in that site, as I say, the next owner, the TV station decides to move, that property could then build a 45-foot high educational building. Am I correct?
No, under that zoning district, that's a maximum height of 30 feet.
30 feet.
In order to do something what you're talking about.
30 foot. Right now, I went driving around there. In the back, there is a building. It looks to be about 2 stories. There's a loading dock garage doors. So I would guess it's 20 feet. And it doesn't, and it's no windows overlooking the residential homes. I don't know how people in a residential home would feel if 5 years from now, a 30-foot building with windows overlooking their homes, their right to privacy. I just don't see what the gain is to our community to do this as opposed to giving the owner what they want. And we always try to give the owner what they want if we can comply with the neighboring communities, neighboring sites. I think the neighboring sites would very much be offended by somebody building a 30-foot high building with windows overlooking their backyards where they feel some right to privacy, but it would be violated. So I would again come back to you and suggest that you consider giving the station what they want, letting them build the center. It would be a valuable addition, but it would not expose our community and our residents to a possible scenario that would be very undesirable in the future. And you're representing the TV section, correct? Correct. Does the TV station necessarily want a change? Am I correct? That the TV station did not seek the change in zoning?
They want to be in compliance with the city's regulations, land use code, comprehensive plan, and the zoning code.
The zoning,
The variance is, you mentioned a variance. Variance is not the appropriate procedure according to the city regulations to do what we're doing. To change it to what you're fearful of would require another public hearing like this, a proposed plan, and the opportunity for the public to speak. This is simply to take what's there now and be able to bring it into compliance with the comprehensive plan and the zoning.
do you realize what you just said today? Give the public an opportunity to speak about their feelings to this board, and we did not, I'm sorry, there is nothing about this procedure that I find palatable. And so I will vote no on this, and I hope I can convince my board members to vote no on this, just to represent the interests of our community and our residents. I don't think it's asking too much of the city to have them come back and pay the price of having another hearing and letting the public speak on their feelings on the matter. I don't honestly think you will get, from my discussions with the people involved in the aisles, which is they're in favor of this building. They have no objection to it. Their biggest concern is what the future has in store for them. And that's unknown. And by adopting the measure tonight, we are exposing them to the vagaries of what a future owner would do. I don't think it's necessary. I think we can accomplish everything we want by giving you the variance, having you do what you want with the building, a one-story building on Ever City, and then there'll be no objection.
Understood.
I rest my case.
If I could ask Mr. Sheriff, is there a way to condition the zoning?
That's not the issue before. That's not the issue before the board tonight. The board has a specific agenda item in front of them that does not contain that component. So they can dispose of the matter as presented.
And just as a follow-up to that, is the variance application the way to resolve the nonconformity?
In my opinion, it is not.
So it would be the land use change and the zoning change.
The way it appears on tonight's agenda.
How does that impact the deed restriction?
It does not.
So it'll still be restricted to nonprofit?
That's correct. The deed restriction is unaffected by the board or the commission's action on this agenda item.
May I ask, are you saying that they could not achieve their desired goal by asking for a variance to build a one-story building?
I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that the item before the board is appropriate to dispose of.
Right, we are not discussing the variance. I just want to know if they still have the option. Are they, if we vote no, have we cut off their option for coming back to request a variance to build their one-story building or a cultural center in the future?
In my opinion, a variance would not be a suitable matter to come before the board for what they want to accomplish.
All right, any comments from this side of the board? Questions? Chris?
Yeah, I just have just a couple. I mean, we don't know what the future site plan holds because it's still in development, and it seems that for 30 years or whatever the timeline is, this has been in the hands of applicant. They've been able to succeed with the site as it is. I understand they want to make changes, and I just need to make sure I'm clear that they're not able to make any changes without the zoning, without updating or changing the zoning, correct?
That's been the determination of
Right,
city
so
staff.
staff is like, well, based on the current zoning, we can't really review these, or you can't apply for a parking lot where you need to put on more, so, is on the city side, if this did go through and they got their zoning, they came back with a site plan, being the proximity to the very big park, it looked like up in towards the northwest corner. I mean, there's segments of the park and playground and paving area that the kids would be utilizing, that are right up against potentially a parking area. What would be the restrictions or the requirements for the site plan to provide what level of buffer, walls, you know, something of safety so that the kids don't, and so that if I'm sitting and enjoying the playground with my children, I don't have parking lot noise and trucks and or whether it's equipment or other utilities right on the other side of that side of the property. Like what would the setbacks be for any sort of equipment, a generator, cook yards, dumpsters, whatever it might be.
I might be able to give that a try.
Okay.
And it's again, the site plan is not on as part of the agenda because it's an administrative. But we're not expanding the parking anywhere to the north. Parking's actually going to the west side on your screen, closer to the lake. That's just immediately to the west. And then the addition itself is proposed on the front side of the building on the east side.
Right. You mentioned
so there's really no significant change to that northern side that gets closer to the area.
Right, and then that kind of like that lower left hand
Yeah,
nothing's really happening.
There's nothing happening there on my client's property as well as the park property. It's just both of them are just unused at the moment.
Right. And again, I mean, that's the members' point, that doesn't prevent something in the future. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. This property was transferred to South Florida Public Telecommunications by the city of Boynton Beach.
I believe you're right.
And the deed restriction was put in the deed. It's perpetual restriction that goes with all subsequent deeds. Is that correct?
That's correct. Okay.
So that deed, that restriction, that protection is going to go even if they were to sell the property. And I think that would raise a big enough stink that the city might come back and say, well, you're doing something, we're going to take the property back, whatever could happen then. That's always a possibility. By selling it to somebody who would not observe the deed restriction, I would assume the city would have some recourse against that party if they didn't conform to what the deed restriction is. Mike, why has it taken since 1986 to 2019 for us to? This was always wrong. Why has it taken that long for us to have caught this?
That's a good question. I don't know if it's necessarily catching it, but it's been development activity that's prompted the attention on it. Staff can only put so much effort into proactively cleaning up certain things within the city and addressing them and researching properties and deed restrictions.
Hear anything? Have a microphone?
Sorry. Staff does on certain occasions, under certain initiatives, proactively go and look at things like this on the map. In fact, we are looking at other properties, but it's been a private action of development that has triggered this attention on the property.
It was the sale in 2019 that caused this to start, or brought this to
the expansion of it, yes.
As I see it, the city gave them the property to use in a specific way. It's protected in that way by the deed restriction. Somebody should have changed the zoning when it was originally done. It wasn't done. How can the city now, in good conscience, tell them no, you can't use it as we've told you could use it, especially since you have that restrictive aspect of the deed, which keeps it the way it is.
Mr. Bush, any comments, questions?
No, sir. Thank you.
Member from the public, you didn't get your chance. Would you like another shot? Please state your name and address when you come to the mic. Keep it brief. 3 minutes, please. You'll be sworn in over here.
So I can speak for 3 minutes.
If it's on the agenda item, yes.
Sir, have you been sworn?
No, that's what I'm here for.
Okay, let's do it. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
What we got, yes.
Ernest McNally, 710 Northeast 7th Street, Boynton Beach, also known as Harbor Hall Inlet Club. It seems like where I live, I'm learning after owning and moving in there, that most of what happens in Boynton Beach, directly or indirectly, affects where I live, which means if you do a development 6 blocks away, all their noise and traffic affects everybody. Noise travels on the water, traffic invades everybody, infrastructure problems from overdevelopment. So here's what I've noticed when I come to these meetings.
Are you speaking on the agenda item or?
Yeah, we're speaking about this property that you're trying to make a radio station and you're trying to give them exactly what they want without the public's input, without a regular. So my experience is that every time you do this with this board, even if you vote no, it goes back to the mayor and the commissioner and the city lawyer and they approve it anyway. Just like with the signs, just like with everything that this gentleman presents. You say no, and it doesn't matter what you said. So the question is, why are we even here? Why are we here? The lawyer has an agenda. The agenda of the city lawyer is always to make deals work for the lawyers and the architects and the engineers for these proposals. It's just like a team. And what you say doesn't matter, and what I say doesn't matter. So I don't think I need 3 minutes.
Okay.
You let it?
Appreciate it. All right, we are finished with public comment, finished with board comment. I'll go ahead and entertain a motion at this time.
Make a motion to approve the XEL's request, item 7.7.c on the agenda.
Second?
We have a second. Do we want to do a roll call on these items tonight?
I haven't heard a second yet.
Tom got a second. Would the clerk please do a roll call?
Yes.
Thank you.
Trevor Rosecrans,
Aye.
Butch Bunyan,
Aye.
Chris Simon, who arrived at 6:30. Tim Litch,
Yes, as well.
Kevin Fisher Johnson, Darren Allen.
Yes.
Thomas Ramago.
Prometeo? Yes.
Michelle, thank you. And Mr. Sobel.
No.
So it passes.
Thank you.
It's the one.
Appreciate it. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to new business here. Yes, motion carries. Thank you. Go ahead and move on to agenda item 7A and 7B. City Attorney, do you think we should combine these two in the presentation and vote separately, correct?
With the consent of the applicant, yes.
We have that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. 7A and 7B, approved request for new major site plan and master plan modification for 1320 South Federal Highway to allow construction of 10,898 square foot structure and associated site improvements on a 0.51 acre parcel located at the southeast corner of South Federal Highway and Riviera Drive in the MU1 zoning district. Applicant Ty Eriks and J. Jackson Holdings LLC. 7A is for the approval of the request for a height exception to allow the tower elements and architectural features to be constructed at 54 feet 10 inches in height, 9 feet 10 inches above the maximum allowable height of 45 feet in the MU1 zoning district. Amen.
Good evening again. For the record, my name is Bradley Miller of Urban Design Studio, here representing the applicant for 1320 South Federal Highway. This is an interesting situation. This is a project that's located on the east side of Federal Highway, just a little bit north of Woolbright Road, across from Dunkin' Donut, One Boynton, where Sweetwater is, and Bachiami's is. That's on the west side of Federal, and then surrounding it on the east side, we've got Colonial Center, which is an office park to the north. Single family along Riviera Drive to the east, and Snug Harbor, which is a age-restricted multifamily condominium residential project. This site, for some history, when I moved to the area in 1990, and there was an IHOP on this property. The IHOP was torn down around 2005, and the property has remained vacant ever since. A few years ago, in 2018, I represented the property owners at the time then for a 3-story building. This was coming after the changes to the CRA redevelopment area, coming up with a redevelopment plan for mixed uses along Federal Highway. I represented that application, and we were granted approval for a land use amendment change to the mixed use low land use designation. Same for the zoning from a commercial C3 district to the MU1, which is the lowest mixed use district that's out there. And then with that, the site plan for a 10,898 square foot 3-story building, a height exception of 54 feet 9 inches, and all that was approved, 2018. The land use and the zoning stays valid. The site plan has 18 months before it expires. The prior property owner didn't do the extensions that are available for the site plan expired. Along comes, personally, my dentist, Ty Eriks. In February, he purchased the property, unknowing that the site plan had expired. So we got together with staff and we said, well, what do we do? And the process is what we're doing here tonight is requesting site plan approval for the approval that was granted in 2018 for the same 10,898 square foot 3-story building and the height exception. So I was brought in around in August to assist, and we were staff has been great on helping us expedite this because we've got some. In the meantime, Dr. Eriks, who is a dentist with a business here in Boynton Beach, he's got an existing practice out on Woolbright Road, and literally he's had his hands in my mouth for about the last 5-6 years. And they're all in there still. He was working on financing to be able to move forward to get this wake-up call that I got to tell him, your site plan is expired. That's never fun. So what we've done here is in December, we submitted the same application package that we did back in 2018 for the approval. And then staff reviewed it for there's what codes have changed since then that might alter the plan. So this is the site plan that was approved in 2018. The building is on the west side, up along the Federal Highway side, which is corresponding with the CRA redevelopment plan. There's a pedestrian area there. The parking is behind. There's landscaping all around. The parking, there's 32 spaces on the site itself. And then it was approved with 13 parallel spaces along Riviera Drive. Allowed by code then, allowed by code today. So in reviewing it, the uses in the building were for the prior hope was that the tenant in 2018 was going to be a dermatologist. And what happened in that deal is the dermatologist dropped the deal after the approvals, and that's why it didn't move forward. So the approvals that were granted before were for medical office, for an art museum and for retail space, which are allowed uses in this zoning district. Top floor was going to be medical office. The middle floor was either going to be medical or professional office, and then the bottom, some retail space in this art museum. The application tonight is the same thing. Dr. Eric is planning on taking at least the third floor of the building. He may take some of the second floor, depending on how his growth plan goes, but he has the ability to also lease out the second floor and the ground floor. So we submitted the application, and it was, you can see, we don't have the color there, but in a moment there will be color. But it's a same configuration, same access point, same location of the building. The architectural plans haven't changed at all. But what did change was we had to shift the building to the east by 2.5 feet. The code changed from needing 16 feet of pedestrian area along the road to 18.5 feet. So in doing that, we needed to shift some parking. So we shifted one handicap stall down to the south side. The prior plan had some compact spaces and had a motorcycle space. These are all standard spaces plus the 2 handicap spaces. And in doing that parking shift, we lost 1 parking space. We still have 1 extra more than the required 43. So we have a total of 44. We also needed to enlarge some of the landscape islands. The ones there right in the middle of the parking lot were at 8 feet, which was allowed before, now they're 10. So that played into the configuration as well. So we made those changes. And then the last thing was we had, it was approved previously with a 4-foot sidewalk that would be constructed along Riviera Drive, and staff asked us to change that to 5 feet. So we made those changes, and that's the site plan that's before you tonight. And just to go back, this is a colored version of the old plan. This is not the new plan. We didn't go to the level of drawing it up because the similarities are so close. But with the landscape plan, we still have a plant palette there that's complying with the code and providing canopy over the parking lot. As part of the detailed plans, there's actually a canopy plan that shows how those trees cover the parking lot for sustainable development. There's native material, there's the peanut, help me. Which butterfly? The butterfly attracting plants, which is now, thanks to Ms. O'Leary, is part of the code. So everything applies to this new plan. The architecture, these are the elevations we showed back in 2018. This is the west view. So on the federal highway side, I think it's a great looking building, obviously a contemporary style building, a lot of glass and angles. The east side, which would be facing out towards Riviera Drive and residential. So back side, I think the stairwells are pretty cool here, where they're actually open air, but yet they're camouflaged with the louvers. And then the north and south, respectively, of those views of the architecture. So those are the identical elevations that we showed 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago. The height exception that was also approved, the maximum height in this district is 45 feet. And we meet that top where it says level 4 is actually in the top right corner, is actually at 40 feet 8 inches. And then the parapet's another 4 feet. So even with the parapet, which is actually exempted out of the height requirement, it meets it. What the height exception is for is to allow the elevator shaft to extend up, as well as the stairwells on both corners. That's the only purpose for the height exception. And again, that was approved as well as the site plan. From a rendering standpoint, this is, as you're looking west, the beautiful sunset line of the building. And this is maybe a year after planting the trees. And the great thing with graphics these days is this is a more mature ability to what that view would be as the trees mature on site. I had a great meeting with the neighbors, and I want to thank Dr. Carrie Snyder, who she and I have become best friends over the last week or two. She actually lives in the first house right underneath where it says single family, and she helped arrange a meeting with not only the residents of Riviera Drive, but also some folks from Snug Harbor. And I think the folks behind are from those communities. And we had a good discussion, and we went through some of the items. The line that I put there is just really showing the designation between what historically the federal highway corridor being commercial and then the residential behind. So Riviera Drive is this entry to the residential behind, but it also provides the access for this commercial space. And access was something that's a concern of the neighbors. This is going back to a 2008 aerial, which shows the IHOP gone, but you can see where the parking and the driveways used to be. Used to be one there on Federal Highway, which Federal Highway is now controlled and regulated by the DOT. It was then as well, but the regulations are much more strict now, and that's no longer an option to have a driveway that close to Riviera Drive. Not to mention it would conflict with having a building up along the roadway. The other driveway is back here on the eastern side of the property, which is almost exactly where we're proposing it on our plan today. So those matters that I'm going to touch on some of the key points that I took from the neighborhood meeting, and I'm sure that they will talk about more. One was the location of the driveway, which I just went over. So where the red arrow is almost exactly where it was in when the IHOP was there. Another was through the staff review, there was the requirement to put a sidewalk on both sides of the Riviera Drive. The pavement itself is offset, and so the concern of some of the folks at Snug Harbor was that sidewalk may come into close proximity to either they've got a little entry wall that's just on the south side of that, or a hedge. And through the conversation, it was, why do you need the sidewalk? That's something that we're doing it through the review by your staff, but it's obviously something that we would not be opposed to eliminating from the plan. That's the sole desire. The parking along Riviera Drive, that text is really small, but what that is a section out of the code that talks about off-street parking, or on-street parking, I should say, not off-street, on-street parking. And on-street parking is something that's allowed and oftentimes encouraged through the CRA district, which is what we're in. There's a list of criteria there that needs to be met to be able to have that on-street parking, one of which is the city engineer approving the design. So not only has this been reviewed this time, but it was reviewed before and found to be in compliance with all those criteria for the on-street parking. One more thing on the on-street parking, because I know it's going to come up with the residents, is, and we do have our traffic engineer here who can go into more detail if you wanted to. But oftentimes you go up in West Palm, they use on-street parking as a calming factor, a street calming, traffic calming factor along the roadways. Part of the issues I think that they've had on Riviera Drive are the speed around those curves, and being able to get trucks in and out, especially at the end of Riviera Drive, which really doesn't have a suitable turnaround area for, especially for larger trucks. And that's not an uncommon thing here in the city of where the other parts. So the pavement itself is suitable and complies with the standards of the code for the width that are gonna allow cars, trucks to go through. The turnaround at the end is really not, it's a city road, city owned and maintained roadway. Not really a responsibility for my client to address that turnaround. But what we did talk about is the possibility of a speed bump, which is in the orange circle there, that would help slow traffic down. And also some extra signage. There's already signage up close to the federal highway that says that it's a dead end street, if you will. But we could add some signage there that would hopefully help with that traffic turnaround. The other driveway that's just north of the circle is actually leading to the office complex. It's just north of Colonial Center. So there is some commercial traffic that comes out of that, and there would be from our driveway as well. And then the last thing that I put on my list was there are concerns about what are the uses going to be. And to Mr. Sobel's point on the last application, that was a concern of residents of what can it be. So we went through the use list. Myself and my client went through the use list, and we actually gave them a 3-page letter and a use list that unfortunately happened before your packets came out, but I do have it. And we provided that, going through it, and we took out uses that we felt weren't suitable for there. We can continue working with the neighbors before going to city commission on adjusting that. And for a site plan application, I think Mr. Sheriff will confirm with me that there can be a condition of approval that would either restrict or limit the uses that might be found objectionable. So we're willing to work that way as well. So with that said, what we're asking you to do here tonight is to re-support the approval of the major site plan for the 10,898 square foot 3-story building, and the uses. The uses aren't really part of that site plan application, but those are the uses that are on the plan. And then the height exception to allow the elevator shaft and the stairwells to extend above to be able to get some access to that, to the roof. So with that, I will end my presentation, and of course I would like to have opportunity to discuss comments.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, this time we'd ask anybody in the public who'd like to speak on this topic to please stand and be sworn in now, unless there's just. If there's going to be a match, everybody get up, let's do it all together.
Yeah, just in case you change your mind. Swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this proceeding will be the truth, the whole thing.
Yes. Hi, Susan Oyer, 140 Southeast 27th Way. I was on the board when this went through the first time. There was going to be yoga up on top. I didn't have a problem with it then. I don't have a problem with it now. My issue is the height exemption. As you know, height is one of my favorite problems with the city. So I'm all for this project. I just think it needs to be ratcheted down because I don't think we need to be at 54 feet 10 inches. The sign out front, because I drove by it every weekend just to make sure that it was in my head where I thought it was. And it says 3 stories. When you think of 3 stories, you think of, you know, what you're seeing in that picture. You're not thinking of, oh, let's add another, what is that, 15 feet on top of it? Sorry, my math is off. 9 feet, 10 inches on top of what, you know, your advertising is what the property is going to be. So I think there needs to be a way to adjust that down. And I'm all for this again. I think it's great. I liked it the first time. I just don't like us setting the constant precedent of having constant exemptions for height. And you're already surrounded by nothing but 1- and 2-story buildings. So that is my issue. And then of course my usual issue of there's too many palm trees projected and not enough canopy trees. And I think you really need to be looking at planting more big canopy trees to offset that parking. And are you going to be using permeable pavement? Are you going to be using a bridge structure with gravel? You know, how are you mitigating the water? And, you know, how are you mitigating the climate? So I think, you know, maybe we should be looking at what the pavement is that's going to go in there. And where's the electric car chargers? 25% of all cars will be electric in the next 2 to 3 years, based on current projections. There's no electric car chargers there. Where is that? And, you know, maybe you should be bringing back the compact spaces. Cars are either going bigger or they're going smaller. There's not much in between. And then, let's see, oh, you need more communities and more sweet almonds for all the tall butterflies that live in the area, which I think that's what Bradley was looking to ask me what it was during his presentation. But you should be adding communities and sweet almonds, and maybe some pretty small, medium-sized flowering trees along the front, not palms, that serve no purpose, and they are not trees, nor do they convert CO2 to oxygen. They're actually banned in Miami. And, you know, we're trying to reduce the amount of palms in Boynton too. So thank you for your time. So please vote yes on B, but no on A.
Thank you, Susan.
It's rehearsed.
Yes, please state your name and address for the record.
Carrie Snyder, 630 Riviera Drive in Boynton. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. Technicality, do I have more than 3 minutes? Because I tried to check that out before. Because I kind of need it. I'll be as fast as I can. I asked beforehand and was told that it would be okay. But, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, or Mr. City Attorney, how do you handle that? We've kind of set a 3-minute limit here. We're not counting the system.
You should hold to the 3-minute limit, but allow for the discretion of the board by motion to deviate for the rule of the day with respect to this item if you like.
Okay.
So if you, as the chair, wish to extend additional time, ask for a consensus of the board.
We'll see where we go with this one.
Okay.
Let's keep it productive and efficient.
Well, it would be more than 3 minutes, but if
Just
go.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. Just for a little context about Riviera Drive, many of you remember this, more than a few years ago, about 5 years ago, there was a big struggle to remove sober homes from our street, and it was a couple years battle, but eventually the residents were able to succeed and get their neighborhood back. And we really enjoyed having a nice family-oriented, peaceful place to live. And part of the rationale for the removal of the sober homes, it's been indicated that it was because the street was viewed as residential. After reviewing the site plan and meeting with Mr. Miller and talking to Mr. Rumpf and so forth, I appreciate all their time. I'm concerned, and many of my neighbors, about the proposed ingress-egress from Riviera Drive because of traffic and it being primarily a residential street. When the IHOP was there, the primary entrance was from Federal, and then if you wanted to take your life in your hands, you could kind of go through the potholes out that other egress, which came out onto Riviera Drive. We would very much like to see every effort made to look at other options so as not to have the primary and sole egress be off of Riviera Drive, right down by where the residential homes are. We've had an ongoing problem on the street already with volume of traffic and turnarounds and speeding. And once they get to the straightaway, that's when they really go fast, like 50, 60 miles an hour. It's unbelievable. So if there's anything that could be done to address going in that close to the residential homes, we would really appreciate it. And if it could be moved up closer to where Snug Harbor comes out, it might help mitigate some of the issues that may occur with trees and bigger vehicles in these parking spaces if the parking spaces go through. Currently, there are no parking spaces along Riviera Drive, so this is a residential street. And we're concerned about the parallel parking, and especially in relation to how the people will be trying to parallel park, the congestion. They'll have to turn around either before or after they use the parallel spots. And wherever you have people parking and congregating, you have noise and you have litter, and we're just concerned that they'll be coming down our street to turn around in order to park on the westbound side and so forth. We'd very much like to see it be eliminated from the southbound side because it's right by residential property. People going in and out of these spots are going to impact our lives in relation to using our driveways to turn around and so forth. Police officers even go through our driveways to turn around and have a circle drive. So any consideration on eliminating the proposed parking on both sides would be greatly appreciated. I think that consideration should be given to reducing the size of the building so that they can fit all their parking spaces on their 0.51 acres. I know it's cost effective to use the plan that they had from 2018, but we'd really like to see, we love the building, it's a beautiful building. We'd like to see its impacts be confined to its property area. I want to bring up also the potential for traffic stacking there on Riviera Drive with 43 additional cars are coming and going from this property. Also out on Federal Highway, does the turn lane where you're coming from the north and turn into Riviera Drive, is that long enough to accommodate this increase in traffic volume? There's going to be many trucks and cars coming and going to support the building, depending upon what the ultimate uses end up being. We already have stacking from Woolbright Road back half mile, many times in the morning up to about when lunch hour ends from Woolbright Road back to the north. And coming out of Publix on the Woolbright, they're stacking, of course, Dunkin' Donuts, we don't need to mention the stacking there, but and then once the 10-story condo building is occupied, our traffic is going to be pretty horrendous in that area. It's a little different than up at Point Beach Boulevard because everybody's going to be coming to that intersection. Okay, permissible mixed uses. We have some concerns about some of the items on the list, and one in particular, the liquor store potential. What's the other one? Just give me a second. A restaurant that might be having hours in the evening, and a drug and alcohol treatment counseling, because we just sort of got rid of drug and alcohol off our street. So we'd really like to see daytime hours only, so as not to have people coming down our street, turning around, speeding, and so forth at all hours of the night. We'd like to see signage that there's no overnight parking in the ultimate parking lot, especially if the egress is into Riviera Drive, and no loitering. In addition to lights and cameras on the building, they need to be on the parking lot. Potential flooding issues. The site plan says flooding is not a concern for this property. It is a concern and it is an issue on our street. We have a catchment basin there, but more needs to be done. This property is higher than our street, and we'd like to be sure that our flooding issues are not harmed or increased with this building. I've already mentioned the traffic issues. We're very concerned. I think some of the neighbors will talk more about that. The speed limit currently is 25 miles an hour right there. And if all this goes down the way that it is on the diagram on the site plan, the speed limit needs to be reduced there.
All right, may I ask you to
wrap it up?
Yeah.
Okay.
30 seconds.
Oh, transient people are a problem there on Federal Highway. There needs to be a plan to mitigate this and prevent these kinds of incidents. The trash, I guess they're taking care of that near the building. We just don't want it blowing down the street, and the management needs to be on top of that. During construction, we have concerns about where all the trucks are going to park, how they're going to turn around, about debris mitigation. We need a fence, and the noise, and what are the hours? Can we have 2 days off on the weekend from all this noise and dust? We'd really like that. And where are they gonna park during construction? Okay.
I need to move on to more public.
Okay, well, I do have a list, I just want to say,
I see.
of
See that.
conditions that I would like to have incorporated into the public record that would address some of our concerns, and that we would like to see that these conditions are conditions of approval.
Could you submit the list to the clerk so that we can move on?
I will do that, because we would like these conditions as to be part of the approval process
I
and in the
understand.
official record.
The applicant has.
We have lots of ideas about how to fix it too. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, I appreciate it. All right, anyone else? Covered a lot of bases, so if we're gonna repeat, we're gonna keep it 3 minutes, please.
No, I have a couple other things. My name is Linda Morgan. I live on Riviera Drive. I have lived there since 1998. I'm also president of the condo association, the Colonial Center, which is just north of there. As a representative of the Colonial Center, one of my big concerns is this building will completely block off our sign on the street. I took pictures today, and where the building is situated, it will totally block our sign as it stands now. So we need some sort of assistance with moving our sign or getting some way that we can still have our sign visible for the street for the Colonial Center. Also, our concern at the Colonial Center is that our parking is already extremely limited, and if we have overflow, then this is going to go into our property, and as I said, we're already very limited on our own parking. As a resident, one of the main concerns that I had at prior times is they talk about this roof deck on the top. They're asking for an extension of the height, and they keep failing to say that there's a roof deck that in some parts of here says it's available for patients for meditation and yoga. Well, first of all, I don't know about you, but I go to the dentist. I'm not interested in going on somebody's roof and meditating. And I wonder that this roof area will just become a party area for the members of the people who are working there. I don't want a party going on the roof of my building when it blows right down. All that noise goes right down the canal. Also, when it says we had a question about what's going to be proposed for the retail space. You know, again, a neighborhood area. If I lived in an apartment building with a retail bar underneath, that was my choice. I don't want a retail bar or restaurant at the corner of my street with late hours and additional delays. The roof deck is the biggest thing that we're concerned about. There also, and there is a line in the statement that says, is this going to affect property values and living conditions? Yes, this roof deck will. And there's a parapet up there. It's a potential for blowing over in a hurricane, sending debris down our street. Also, on page 60 of the pages that they were attached to the agenda, it says there's a bus shelter on the property and in the building library. I heard no mention by the developer of a bus station on the property. And then also on page 39, they said that this is going to be a public plaza on the corner of Riviera and Federal, and to have pedestrian interaction is encouraged. Also, outdoor activity is encouraged. I'm wondering what sort of outdoor activity of pedestrian interaction is going to be involved. This is a residential area. We don't want parties at the end of the corner. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Kathleen Henderson. I live at 654 Riviera Drive, and I want to reiterate my discontent at obstruction of traffic. When you come in off of US 1, the traffic is flying from the light when you turn off Fulbright. And when you get to that street and you turn in and people are trying to parallel park, they're trying to open their car doors. I ride a bike in that area. I'm going to have to worry about traffic on that area. And we have a curve in the street that makes it difficult. When I come from down that road, they can't see me at the condos. So when they pull out, they're going to now pull out blind because they have traffic parked there. I'm trying to come around, traffic coming out. It's a nightmare, and there's no reason for street parking. I understand the building is beautiful, and the parking lot should house the people that are using the building, but the street should be off limits. I just don't understand that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tom Ward. I'm at 650 Riviera Drive in Point Beach. I'd like to ask the city attorney, is there a possibility to make a motion that no vote happens tonight until we can secure legal counsel and expert testimony to look over the plans in more detail? I think I noticed a few things that don't look to scale. There were a lot of little cars pieced in and so forth, but where Kathy and other people are talking about, it's, if you've driven down the road, and maybe you should take a look at the road, it's very, it's 18 feet right now. Once you start to put cars there and trucks and the amount of vehicles that would be going in and out of there, it's also in Mr. Bradley's statement, he says it's a local roadway, but my understanding is it's a residential roadway. I wouldn't know how to find that, or you could maybe guide me to find out what the difference between a residential roadway and
Question for city staff.
yeah, good.
They'll respond to the questions at the end.
Okay.
We're collecting.
Okay, yep. And can a motion be made to delay the vote?
At the appropriate time, if the board wants to take up that type of issue, I'll provide an answer to the board.
I would acknowledge that what happens here does not dictate what happens to the commission.
Okay.
So if you request us to take that step or follow that request, that does not deter the commission from approving.
Is the commission what this gentleman was referring to, or it's just
the city commission?
My goal is correct. So it controls their time. This board is just an advisory board. We're volunteers. We have experience in different fields in land development. And whether we vote yes or whether we vote no, the journey for this agenda item continues. You all need to be aware of that.
Would any of you be available to tour the site yourselves? To then,
I'm very familiar with the site. I used to live out when I was growing up as a child.
And I, in the COP program, and we patrol that area all the time, so I'm very familiar.
okay, so you know the curve.
I'll tell you what the name of the
And the drawing, that's why I said about the drawing, it's out of scale, because the entrance to the other building is within 15 feet of where this proposed.
And some of us on the board were here for the last time it came before us, so we still have some institutional knowledge also.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Short podium. Hi, my name's Candy Kellyanne, 642 Riviera Drive. I have to go to the tall podium. First, I'd like to acknowledge and thank the members of the Planning Development Board for their service. I served on this board some years ago, so I understand the time and commitment that's required to properly serve on this board. Hi, Mike. I'm here tonight with regard to the proposed development of the 1320 South Federal Highway. The objection with this project is threefold. One, there will be parallel parking on Riviera Drive. So you've heard that a lot, and me too. Two, access to the project will add a fourth point of ingress and egress to Riviera Drive. And three, the access point is too close to the part of Riviera Drive that goes down to the single family homes. Riviera Drive is a dead end street that services three communities, I guess you'd say. One, Snug Harbor, which is a 55 plus community with 194 condominiums, 194. Riviera Drive, the single family homes down the end of the street, there's 14 single family homes, and there's one vacant lot still. And then the Colonial Center, which is the commercial office complex with 28 units. So if you just do a little bit of math and estimate that the average of 2 people live in each property in Snug Harbor, 2 in the single family homes, and 2 people in the office of the commercial office complex, that's approximately 500 residents and or owners and vehicles already using Riviera Drive to get to their homes and to their offices. As it stands, we have close calls every single day. The residents of Snug Harbor have to pull out almost to the road in order to see the traffic coming off of Federal because the way the road is angled. The residents of the single-family homes have to be extremely careful exiting our portion of the street as cars are coming in and out of the Colonial Center. The crux of the matter is there's too much congestion there already before adding a nearly 11,000 square foot, 3-story commercial building that will only have access from Riviera Drive. We request that the parallel parking be eliminated off of Riviera Drive. I drove up and down the highway and went up and down all the little finger streets off of Federal. I didn't see another residential street that had parallel parking on it. Reduce the size of the building by the square footage necessary to eliminate the 13 parallel parking spaces. Additionally, we request that the site be self-contained with access to the commercial building be off of Federal Highway and not a residential street. I know they say it can't be done, but anything can be done. There was already 2 seconds. The Civia building, which is at 709 South Federal, has this entrance. I've got copies for you guys because it's got the entrance off of Federal and goes like through the building, and then they park in the back. Yeah. So that site is like totally self-contained, and that would be a compromise that might work. We want to be good neighbors, but we can't take that traffic on Riviera Drive. And I would ask all of you, please, to just come drive down our street, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bill Fritz, FRTTS 652 Still Lane. First, I want to thank everybody for being here tonight, all our members. Gary, your dogged determination is to be commended. We all appreciate it. I want to second everything that's been said by the residents tonight, and it really comes down to this. This is a residential neighborhood. We're not trying to stand in the way of progress, but there are considerations. The youngest resident, I think, is still here. Yeah. Say something, but this is a family community. From Woolbright north, it's all residential. Yes, there's some commercial. We've got the pink house on the corner of Castilla Lane at Federal. We've got Colonial. I'm heartened to hear that you guys know the neighborhood, so you know what a close residential community this is. So I just ask you, I'm not trying to stand in the way of progress. The gentleman from the urban design gives great PowerPoint, but you can't view it in the abstract. It looks great on the screen, but when you go there, as Tom said, drive through the neighborhood. Young lady before me said, drive through the neighborhood. I'd suggest do that. The two of you who know the neighborhood, take your colleagues and show them it's a residential community. We're not opposed to the commercial. We need it. We like it. But it needs to be consistent with the preponderance of that community, which is residential. Thank you.
Hi, Casey Lozelle, 647 Riviera Drive, and we have a lot next to it. Really want to reiterate what they were saying. I thought Mr. Sobel said something really intelligent earlier about the previous property. Going up to the 4th floor, we have people in the residence with pools. They're going to be looking down at us in our bathing suits from this top level. So, I mean, basically, would you want your family being spied on? So that, as well as the parking, just a few things that they talked about. But I don't think the doctor himself would want his family being spied on. So I think that the height ratio needs to be lowered to what it says without having an upstairs area. And if the elevator is an issue, well, maybe use stairs. So thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Captain Jeffrey Hoffberger, 643 Riviera Drive. I've sat on council before in New Jersey. I've seen this game played before. I invested my life savings to live on Riviera Drive and took a 1-story blank
horrible house with rats infested, et cetera. And before I invested that money, I went to our state's attorney, Dave Ehrenberg, and I said, we have to get these sober homes off of our street. Mike, you know, I talked to you about all this when I was developing the house. We had drug raids going down the street. We've had ambulances going down the street. People still fly down the street now. And at the end of the cul-de-sac, that turnaround is not adequate. The trash trucks can't turn around properly. They run up on the Lascelles property every time they come through. We've had tractor trailers try to go down there. So I would like this commission to look at fixing a roundabout down there. We're eliminating it. And we have a drainage issue. Those things need to be fixed. And we need to put an additional speed bump in there if we're gonna have this, because people fly up and down that street. And you know, we have a little kid living on the street now. Once again, generations have turned and they're gonna continue to turn. So the height variance is a no-go. The parking is a no-go. If we try to come in there with our boats on a trailer, watch what happens. And the traffic issue is out of control. The drainage area where those parking spaces are going to go is going to go away. So what the young lady said about percolation and having drainage in that parking lot has to be looked at. Thank you. All right, with that.
One more thing. No. Can I say something? One more thing? I'll make it very.
Why don't you transfer it to this guy coming up here?
I can represent Barry.
Keith Thompson, 644 Riviera Drive. A lot has been said here. I just want to echo that I agree with pretty much everything that's been said. I'm not going to rehash it all. My wife and I are recent homeowners there. We lived there about 2 years. One of the things that we loved about Riviera Drive was indeed its residential nature. It's fairly quiet being a dead-end street, but it has a perk that it's not an HOA. We're not currently parents, but we hope to one day be and follow in the footsteps of the Lascelles. And I would echo the concerns of the interaction between the increased traffic and what is currently a residential area would be a problem. I wouldn't want my future son to have to navigate all the parallel parking that's on that that's being proposed, as well as the ingress and egress on the eastern portion of the lot. I think both the street parking is an issue. I think the ingress and egress is an issue. It should be at a minimum moved west towards the end of Riviera Drive, if not on Federal Highway. And again, the height. So I don't want to be an impediment to progress. I like progress, but these considerations have to be taken into account.
Thank you. We're getting into the repetitive nature of comments. I don't want to take up everybody's time. Very honest.
You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth. Yes, I do. Thank you, sir.
My name is Ted Cozon, 624 Snug Harbor Drive. So my concern, as well as everyone else, I agree, and I worry about cars pulling down the street, Riviera, and just coming into Snug Harbor, because our parking lot is right there, and they'll be parking wherever they want. If they can't get a spot across the street, they'll come into Snug Harbor. And it's going to be an eyesore having 4 stories. But that's it.
Why are you smiling? You smile.
I'm happy that.
Yeah, we got it right.
You state your name and address for the record, please.
Ernest McNulty, 710 Northeast 7th Street, Point Beach. So, I'm not that far down from you. I'm on 7th by the Goodyear. And every time they make these kind of developments, it destroys more and more the neighborhoods that are east of Federal Highway. As an example, we bought only about a year and 3 months ago. And as this development opens, I notice now, like when I come out of 7th Avenue off 7th Street to get onto Federal Highway, I mean, I sometimes have to wait for 40 cars. And what I'm starting to notice is, I've been all over the world. Where do you ever see a dentist office like this? With a rooftop bar? What kind of dentist office is this? And the other question is, Why are all the doctors and dentists in Boynton Beach have these millions of dollars? I mean, don't they have enough money? Why would you do this to a neighborhood? You know what this building is going to do to that nice neighborhood for this family? It's going to destroy it. Literally destroy it. And now you're talking about letting them have seances and parties up on the rooftop? You know what? You know what's funny? Every time you come before this city lawyer and the boards, you always say, well, we don't have any power. You're right. So my question to you is this. Why do you bring these good people, these family people in here, thinking that if they make a legitimate case to you, that you have some impact?
Did we not just explain to them?
Well, what I'm trying to say is this planning board needs to stop making the public think that if we come in here, that we have an impact. Because whatever you say, every time I go to the council, whatever you say, every time I go to the council meeting, they say, well, we don't care what they said. You know, with the city lawyer and the commissioners, we're going to approve it. So what I'm saying, you guys got less power than we do. And you know what? You know what's funny? When we sit here and look at you guys, you smile a lot because it's not your block. But you gotta know what these people feel like. When you put in a jacuzzi dentist thing there, let this dentist go somewhere else. Or if not, let them build a one-family house dentist office and 5 one-family houses and make it a community. No. You think, oh no, we'll have retail, we'll have a bar up top where instead of, you know, dentist gas, we'll give you tequila. What are you pulling here?
All right, that's enough. One more comment, please.
Yes, sir. I didn't get to give my closing comment. I encourage the Planning and Development Board to postpone this decision so staff can work to address the issues that we have brought forth and incorporate resolution of these issues into a revised site plan with the building being smaller, the parking spaces fitting within their site. We want to be good neighbors and we want a nice, safe neighborhood, and we're looking forward to a happy ending for all parties.
Thank you. Mr. Miller, would you like to come up and make comment on some of the questions and comments you've heard?
Thank you. I'll do my best to help this. One of the common discussion points for the parallel parking. In fact, the whole application process is to comply with the code which your staff has reviewed and considers our plan, our proposal in compliance. So it's not a conditional use situation. It's not meeting standards. It's do you meet the code or don't you meet the code? The parallel parking spaces are something that's allowed to use in the code and can be counted for the parking for a development. And it's something that, although there are streets in the city that don't have it yet, it's something that has been put in here in the last 5 years probably to encourage that. And like I made in my original presentation here, you go to City of West Palm Beach, Flamingo Park area, for example, and there's parallel parking spaces on residential roads everywhere. Transition to the residential road, I don't know if there is a residential road classification. I use local road in the document, the letter that I gave them, because that matches up with the engineering diagram that's in this city's code to match that cross section for the roadway. So it's matching that, and it complies. The rooftop bar, it's a great idea, but it's not part of the proposal. The access that's going up there is to get to the rooftop, and originally the dermatologist was considering to have like yoga classes up there. At the most, how the rooftop might be used for dental practice is to allow his employees to go up there with restricted hours. It's a place to get away, a respite, smoke if you will, and have that spot. There is a comment about eliminate the elevator but use the stairwells. A height exception is needed for either one, the elevator or the stairwells. Both, so the height exception is accommodating the stairwell to get up there. The mechanical equipment is up there. That's why we have the parapet. The parapet screens the mechanical equipment. I think views down the street is you have to have some pretty good eyes to get to backyards and pools from that location. The stacking in the access location, again, it's the same location as it was for my hop, and it's there for a reason. Our traffic engineer is here, and he can give you all the technical criteria, but from a planning standpoint, it's a practice to try to separate that driveway from the main intersection, which in this case is Riviera and Woolbright. So when you heard about the cars are stacking up in that roadway, so you don't have that conflict. You keep that distance separated to allow as much stacking on the roadway that you can. It's a traffic design and a planning design standard that we look at when we're doing plans. That's why I was there before. That's why it's here now. Going back to DOT, it's as a no. It's just the rules and regulations have changed. They just won't allow it that close to the driveway. There were a few things in Dr. Snyder's comments about the uses, liquor store, restaurant, counseling. There's those, like I mentioned, we gave them a list. We haven't had the opportunity to get with them. Be happy to continue that process as we go to City Commission and work on that list and come up with a condition that's something that we can agree to on both sides. Blocking the Colonial Center sign, we'll take a look at that, and if that's something that we need to help out on, we will certainly work with the folks at Colonial Center for doing that. I'll end on the residential community. It is a residential community behind the commercial properties that are up on Federal Highway. It's been that way since Federal Highway US 1 has been the case, where commercial uses were up on the road and residential behind, and this is a component of that over time. It had C3 zoning before, which would allow all these uses that they don't want. So the mixed use is really following the code as to what the CRA redevelopment plan proposed from 2017. And it's been stuck to that plan. The commission has followed along with that plan. It's there for a purpose. So we believe that everything that we've submitted here, it's a good plan. It meets the code. It complies with all the rules and regulations of the code. And with that, we would respectfully request your support for moving this forward to the commission with the recommendation of approval.
Thank you very much, Mr. I'll go ahead and share.
I just want to know if the board wanted to know my opinion regarding the authority to table. The board does not have the authority to table. The code is clear that only the city commission may table proposed development order. So the process that you described was because your advisory board to move it forward to the commission, which will be another process of the initial hearing. They have the opportunity to table at that point.
Thank you. Appreciate the clarification. All right, go ahead and start on the west side of the board. Darren, okay. Tom?
A couple questions for maybe Mike can help me. On the parking, is it customary for the city to allow in the calculation for parking to use the on-street parking? Is this precedent setting with this project, or has it been done in the past?
There are too many locations where pre-existing parking exists up against a residential development or a new development. But yes, it has been. It has been on one occasion. I'm not sure if the project was built or not, but yes, it has. We do encourage on-street parking. Yes, it is a local street per se, but the code does accommodate it. Yes, and allow it to count toward a project.
Isn't it typically in an urban setting where, like in the downtown area, where you have shared use spaces?
That is true. Interesting you said that. And to us, this being in a, if you were to look at the redevelopment plan for the city, the CRA plan, you'll see that this is planned for this type of use. There is a close interface. This isn't the only location along Federal Highway where you have a commercial use in between Federal Highway and a single family neighborhood. And the heights being mixed use low 1 is respective of that. There are compatibility standards in the code, which are sensitive to setbacks and separations where you have such potential incompatibilities with respect to building heights. It should be noted too, the project, the property at the time of being a restaurant was I think, a C3 zoning district, which would allow 45 feet in height.
My question back to the parking. I recognize the parallel parking and the on-street parking is good for traffic calming. I have no problem with that concept. But my question was about the calculation on the parking. Is it customary for the city to use on-street parking as part of the calculation for a new development?
It's a new section in the code to promote downtown redevelopment and use of on-street parking and optimal use of properties too, where values are such that sometimes almost forces or encourages based on the numbers for parking, creative parking solutions or off-site parking solutions. In fact, in the CRA, you can physically go farther away from the site to lease property to meet your minimum parking requirements. It's not required to be on site. All measures to promote redevelopment and take into account the urban setting.
Back to the height, that was my second question. How is it possible to remove the parapet wall or remove, what could be removed to make it come in compliance with our height?
I'll let, sure, no, that makes sense. Yes, what's the minimum necessary to design the rooftop of that building to meet code and to require or replace the required rooftop access elements? Brad might be better equipped to answer that question. We might be able to get a cross section of the elevation drawing to see where those height boundaries are. Yes.
Is it just the elevator shaft?
It's both the elevator shaft and the stairwell, stairwells, I should say. The roof deck meets, actually it's below the 45 feet, which is how the height is measured. So it's a flat roof with the exception of the elevator shaft and stairwells. If you put, and I think I'm remembering right from code that you can have, and in fact that you want a 4-foot parapet above that, which is still below 45 feet, to screen the mechanical equipment that's up there, so you don't see that. So the portions that we're asking for the height exceptions for the elevator shaft to be able to go up there and have that access as well as the stairwells.
I would have loved to have seen it come into the height limit of 40 feet and
45.
And if we have considerations for architectural features, et cetera, then we really should be looking at design. How can we improve the design by giving more features and more height? And I don't see that in this project. I want to see the project happen, but I also want the city to start complying with especially height and parking for good planning measures just for the future, that we start looking differently with the way we plan. I realize we're looking at the CRA plan from 17, but maybe it's time we revisit that CRA plan. There's been a lot of changes in not only the market, the type of house, and ability, et cetera. There's been a lot of changes. So maybe that needs to be reevaluated. I don't have, again, a problem with the actual on-street parking. I just have a problem with the calculation being used for the project.
Understood.
Bradley, if I may, piggyback on what is the purpose of the stairwell going all the way to the roof? Is that just for access?
For access, I think our architect couldn't make it tonight, but I think some of it was for the architectural feature and the symmetry of that backside.
If that stairwell was removed and replaced with a roof capture, that's still not give you access and prevent from leisure.
The way to eliminate that would be that, yes. Obviously, I'm biased, and I think you end up just a straight edge, a more boring building.
We would have the elevator shaft on the side. Stairwell would be, it wouldn't be symmetrical.
Well, the elevator shaft requires a height exception.
Correct.
So.
Thank you.
Just real quick. Yeah, this is a hydraulic elevator.
Yes.
So there is no hoist, no machine room hoist equipment. All your machinery is off on the other side of the roof. So if you didn't have the elevator, if you took away that elevator stop, you could take the elevator down to the third floor ceiling. Is that right? And you still have the mechanical room on the other side.
Yeah.
You still have the stairwells.
So some of that is way over my pay grade on designs of elevators, but there will be an elevator in the building because we have to get to the third floor. It's whether that elevator is allowed to continue to use it to get access to the rooftop, which is, and not only for, I mean, you can get there like through the roof hatch for maintenance purposes. Buildings do that. I think this was done for a couple of reasons to allow, initially it was for the dermatologists to consider some activity up there. I think with my current client, I think there's far less activity than how it was approved the first time. His intentions would just be to have that as a location for employees.
Tom, you're done, right? Thank you. Jay?
Yes, please. A few questions for you. We heard a lot of comments from the audience today who have objections, some of which I agree with, some I'll question. But let's start with the elevator. There's a lot of concern with the elevator, the rooftop being used for purposes that are not necessarily, directly concerned with the office structure, the office activities. Have you considered not having an elevator at all going up to, as I said before, going up to the fourth floor? And if you need access to mechanical, that's fine, but not encouraging people going up on the roof on the fourth floor. Residents here are concerned about their invasion of their privacy. It was another issue I discussed tonight. I think it's a real issue for homeowners here, and I think you got to respect it. And I'm asking these questions so they're on the record, because this is going to be passed on to the city council. We are an advisory board. We don't make decisions. But I think these issues should be succinctly raised to the city commission. So that's one. Do we need the elevator if we're not using the roof for some type of social interaction? Two, you need 43 parking places. You heard people here object to parking on Riviera Drive, which is a residential street. How much smaller would the site have to be if you couldn't count those parking places in? Might answer the question of, yes, it's done some way, some not. But again, the residents don't want it. In respecting their rights, the question would be, what happens to the project if you have to stay with only the on-site parking that you can get? That's number two. Number three, and the residents talked about this, but I can't agree with it. Because I think most people coming into this building will come down Riviera Drive, turn into the parking lot, and they will never be the people that you object to driving down Riviera Drive. They'll have no reason to. They can turn around and that. They're not going to drive. I don't expect they'll drive to the end of the street to the cul-de-sac and come back to the park. So that may be a little bit of a red herring. And the last one is one that personally affects me. And that is, you have two handicap parking places. I'm assuming you're satisfying the ADA issues. Do you know if this building, which is a new building, is going to have automatic doors so that people on walkers, wheelchairs, and crutches can get in by themselves and not require the assistance of someone else? And I say that because I walk out of this meeting because this building is not handicap accessible. The city apologized, they made a mistake, they're correcting it. So I have taken it as a personal affront. If a new building goes up and it has handicap parking, so I can get out of my wheelchair, out of a car, but I can't get into the building. So do you know specifically, will this building have automatic doors?
Ready for responses?
Please.
I'll go backwards. We haven't gone to that level of design on the doors yet. That would be construction plans, but Dr. Verich is here and hears that, and I would think that's something that everybody is progressing toward. The middle point escapes me now. You talked about the elevator shaft.
Well, the elevator, I mean, if the purpose of the elevators is for people on the first floor to get up to the rooftops, they don't want to walk 4 floors. The question is, what is the necessity of this rooftop accessibility for workers or patients if at the same time it represents an infringement on the privacy of homeowners?
Understood.
I'm not sure many other places.
Second point, Mr. Sobel.
Good.
What was the second one?
Okay, that was one, well, the other was what's the impact of saying, not counting the street parking, because residents are concerned about it. And I feel we should listen to their voices and at least address it. If you can't count those in, or you choose not to, what would that do to your project?
On the parking situation, it would reduce it by about 2,600 square feet.
Okay.
On the elevator, it would need to, in just experience with other projects, the elevator, the shaft needs to go a little bit above to be able to get to the 3rd level stop. But I don't think it would be as high. Okay. So the elevator shaft is designed to be able to provide that access to the rooftop. And again, this was based on a different tenant at the time, of which unfortunately my client bought the property and the approvals that he thought were the approvals, including the plan set. So it's unfortunate. Here we are. So the elevator shaft, and the architect would have to figure out that design to keep it from going to the 4th floor. How much would it have to go above? And then they'd have to relook at how the access to that 4th floor is achieved. One thing that I asked my client here earlier while the discussion was going on, and that's why I say that he would be, maybe we could craft a condition to restrict hours to employees only, something along those lines. We would still like to have some access up there. Obviously, we're not going to lose the war by fighting that battle, but it's more important to have this practice there than to have that space. What I would do is employees then would have to find another space, which is on the ground level, which is we've heard about debris and transients and people standing out on the streets too. So it's how, which ones do you follow?
Last question, because you ready. Will your employer present to the city council this plan, or will they also present along with this an alternative showing lower elevators? Are you going to present this no matter what we say?
Right. That's a good question. We haven't talked about it. So it's something that we're going to need to talk about. Obviously, this plan is part of the application, so that moves forward. Do we have an alternative plan for the height exception component of it? You raise a good point.
Thank you, Jim. Tim?
Thank you very much. You've got the electric charging stations.
We do, and I'm glad you brought that up,
They
the
share-
Sawyer's point.
So they share two places.
They do.
My question is, can you charge both simultaneously, or is it a sequential thing?
Yes, actually, the design, so it's, both spaces are charged.
Okay.
And then we're anticipating doing 2 more in addition to the 2 that are on the plan for sustainability points.
There is an abandoned FPL utility easement. What was that earmarked for, and is that being allocated?
There is a above ground power line that goes from I think I'm remembering the pole that's like on
On
East
the
Street.
north side of the property.
Yeah, it's basically an electric, a power line that goes to nowhere.
Thank you.
Very much, Chris. So, Mr. President.
Outside. So I just have a few points, and I'm not gonna repeat and rehash everything that's kind of been discussed already. Lots of good points raised by residents. We mentioned about the functionality of this board in general. The architectural design, I mean, it's, is aesthetically pleasing. I don't have an issue with the appearance or the style of the building itself. You did touch on, you did make one comment about the, you're just following the codes, being able to count the on-street parking. And residents, on one of his screens during the presentation, he did display some verbiage from the code, which states that the city will allow counting the on-street parking on the abutting property line, right? So the north side of Riviera Drive is allowed to be counted as part of the code. It also, in that same paragraph, said that across the street, in essence, across the street can be counted if there's not a building already utilizing it, or if it's something like a residential lot that will not be using that. So they can now acquire that. This developer can now acquire that and utilize that within their calculations, which you don't. So you're following the code, and you're not taking advantage, but you're making use of that, right? In the same presentation, you're also not following code by designing a building that doesn't meet the height restriction. So, you want to follow the code in one aspect and not the other. I understand, I get it that this is purchased. This was a pre-approved project, but it's not like something that you all designed and said, hey, let's go in and try. You're just, hey, this is what you do, let's just try. But because, codes are developed in place for a reason. We just allow exemptions for every project. Why we have why not just let someone just design a building and a property and just bring it in and seek approval? The height restriction, I feel that Boynton is, in certain areas of Boynton, do not allow the scale for certain levels of height that are already within the zoning, the current zoning guidelines. So I lean towards lower buildings. The code also says for the parapet, for the architectural features, for the equipment on the rooftop, this is having a landscaped area, the pergola, the elevator that accesses it, you're encouraging the use, submitting for a 3-story building, but it's going to function as a 4-story building. So I don't think that that's something, this building, this project can be great and can move forward without that. I also think that the configuration of the building is can be redesigned to make better use. You can develop an area, this could be a staggered building, offset, you can cantilever towards the east and whether the north end or the south end, taking some of the additional square footage on the third floor or the second floor, utilizing that, pushing that out towards the east, dropping the height of the building. Now it becomes a stacked building. Now you have that rooftop environment can be on the second floor, the top of the second floor portion of the building, the lower portion. So now you have a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. It's not just a big box. It's, you know, the same height and from all sides, it looks, you know, you can look at two profiles, two elevations, it looks like the same building. The position of the building, again, this is the CRA thing, this is the city's kind of recommendations, and this has been implemented. I personally am against it, where you push the buildings right up against the sidewalk, you hide all the parking in the back, so people that want to go to these stores, if they pass it, well, I'll go back because I don't know where to park, so maybe I won't go back. This is, in this instance, this is also causing the issue with the neighbors to the north blocking the signage. I get that, and I don't know, man, I don't know what, when the city developer adopted this kind of new guidelines, I mean, how do you take into account existing long-standing buildings and commercial properties that have signage, relying on visibility because the parking lot is forward and the building sits back and people are looking for the building, trying to find it. If you have a building that's following the new guidelines that's blocking visibility, how does the city take into account any of that in this new adopted guidelines?
They'll go for it.
A perfect example of that is just north of that. Sorry, just north of that on the west side. I apologize. I want to say it's an Alzheimer's built like a right, club, right? So it's right. So it's assisted living or some sort. With this new guideline and the height that's there, the commercial property owner to the south has severely suffered. No business can function in that lot. That lot that there's two retail spaces there that are going to just, I mean, the building's just going to go dilapidated because nobody will want to have a business there because nobody can see. So how does the city address those issues?
Yeah, this is definitely one of the pains of a redeveloping city where you have existing zoning on the ground as well as a redevelopment plan that is shifting the design of parcel by parcel. I will say the newly adopted sign code, which is what Mike was just whispering in my ear, does allow for reduced setbacks to help in certain situations like this. It does still require the sign to be reapproved in a new location, but we are building in some flexibility into the codes, recognizing that there will be some of this shifting as the CRA plan is implemented along federal highway.
And it's not just the sign, it's
right.
The building itself.
Yes.
And is it now? So this, what we're saying is the colonial building to the north has to apply and come in for a new sign at a new location that you'll approve based on the situation with the being blocked.
That's exactly right.
Right. So by development occurring and being approved next door, you've now added unforeseen costs to the property owner that's been. Okay. I don't see how that seems fair. Right, the person that wants to move their sign to be seen is going to have to pay for that now. So you mentioned about the DOT, right? You mentioned about the DOT will not allow the curb cut on the west side based on the proximity to Riviera Drive itself. Right, the DOT, right. No, I understand that. I deal with that a lot. So what is the distance? I mean, can you push that towards the north end of the property? Does that give you enough distance to be able to, is it 100 feet, 300 feet based on the speed limits? I mean, what is the distance?
Thank you, our traffic engineer.
I apologize, I did not swear in, so if I can do that real quick.
Okay, while I get you, anybody else in the audience that might be asked to testify? You swear or affirm that testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do. For the record, my name is Brian Kelly, traffic engineer, Simmons and White. The DOT requirement is 245 feet. So you would need spacing of 245 feet from Riviera. I think the whole frontage is 100 max. So it's really not.
So not is setting the curb cut at the southwest portion of the parking lot an option based on, I mean, DOT is US 1, now this is a side street based on city requirements and setbacks. Is that an option?
Right, so the DOT wouldn't come into play on here, but it would be poor engineering and planning practice. Typically, you want to have driveways as far away from the major arterial roadway as possible. And so the location here, as far east, is really the best design, particularly for any kind of concern with stack and maneuverability. So whether it actually exceeds code requirements that have to be looked into. But certainly from a design perspective, from a safety perspective, this is the best.
Yeah, I get it. Somebody's making a right-hand turn while somebody's making a left-hand turn into the parking lot. It makes sense.
I would also like to add that the city engineering department does have similar regulations as FDOT on how close the driveway could be.
Exactly.
I believe in this case, it's 150 feet.
Okay. So there's not a lot of options to go. You can go a little bit further east, but not that much, right? So you don't, so the residents, this project doesn't have many options for the curb cut itself. In my experience, in our neighborhoods where we're trying to get traffic calming in the city of Boynton Beach, we're advised that the people that the speed bumps, if somebody's going to this business and they go to that speed bump once or twice every few months, they go to see the dentist once every 6 months. They're not even gonna hit that speed bump because it's west of the property. But the daily usage and the daily driving over speed bumps and traffic calming features of that type cause the most damage to the people that use it the most. So the people that are in the residence that are suggesting that you have speed bumps added into your street, you will end up having costlier mechanical repairs to your cars than the people that are visiting these businesses. Roundabouts might be something else that would be a better traffic calming solution. Because you're not, I mean, it's all flush. You're not interrupting the car. You're addressing the suspension. I think it's suspension. One of the last, there's two pieces. One was I didn't see, and it might have been on one of the other sheets. I might just not have caught it. But what is the required landscape open space percentage on the site? And what are you proposing? You're showing the proposed impervious, but it's not showing what the required is on the plan.
Okay. And it's talking to Dave Bodker, our landscape architect. He doesn't have those exact calculations. My recollection is that there is no minimum impervious, right? So it really comes down to a design standpoint of.
For the city does not require a minimum amount of landscape open space on a project?
Two things. First, it's a factor of drainage requirements, number one, depending on how the drainage is designed for the project. Number two, the islands and green space are more of a factor of number of spaces and the size of the tree islands that are required.
But drainage can be accomplished by exfiltration trenches.
That's correct.
And not by
That's correct.
impervious.
Maximum lot coverage, maybe something else you're thinking of, but not a minimum pervious area per se.
Right, but I mean, but even as it doesn't relate to drainage, and it relates to reflected heat from the asphalt and the building structure itself.
Correct, again, that is not how the ultimate green area is calculated. We've got some of those green standards, sustainability standards within a parking provision, which would include reflectivity of surfaces and things like that. But right now, the code is those green areas which exist are based upon, help me out, Amanda, number of
required landscape islands,
buffers around the parking lot and abutting properties, which could be either 7 feet or 5 feet. And then you've got, based upon the number of spaces, you've got a large tree island count, which then has a maximum or minimum green area underneath each one of those.
I would also add that it does vary according to district. There are districts that have larger parcels that do have minimum open space requirements. MU1, the specific district, does not, just because it is geared towards much smaller parcels. So this district does rely on the requirements of buffers and landscape islands to fulfill that. So it's not a flat statement across the board.
Okay. And then kind of the last thing that I just kind of comment on is again, repeating myself on a lot of these projects, and it has to do with proximity to building, but your retail space that's underneath, and the fact that it's also, your signs are underneath the roof, overhang of the second floor. If I'm driving north, there's no signage or anything on the south side of the south facing or north facing of the building. So I don't know what businesses are there, especially if it's a retail or an art museum. And I don't see, in your east elevation or your west elevation, I wouldn't see those signs until I'm in front of the building, traveling at 35. I think it's 35 to 40 miles an hour in that area. I've missed the opportunity to patron to be a patron of this retail space because I've already passed the store itself. I don't see how this design benefits or encourages the success of the businesses that are going to have the first floor. That's it. I think that, I don't know whether signage or something, or there's a condition for signage for the approval.
In response to that particular issue, I think you and I need to look at push the building up to the street the same way. I'm not a huge believer in that as well. However, if we propose something in the back, it wouldn't be here, because that's the MU zoning district requires it to be up there.
Right.
So we're stuck with that. Then we have the other part of it is that you get the building closer to the residents. It's a double-edged sword.
No, I understand that, but if you stagger heights on the building, if you project it a little bit to the east or north, maybe an L-shaped building, for example, you stagger the heights. Now you can position the floors in such a way so that you can have staggered. If I'm heading north, I've got one sitting further back, the southeast corner sits further back, and then they kind of stair step east. And now at least I can have a sign on the side of my business facing south and that's all that is a little bit more spending a little more time on the table with the architect and just kind of what other ways can we reconfigure this to make it a little bit more successful for every tenant, and as well as the height restrictions and the functionality, and you might be able to maintain your square footage, your rooftop break area, and everything you're seeking in just a different configuration of the building. I think it would still succeed in that respect. Again,
redesign.
Well, yeah, it's just yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like I said, it's aesthetically pleasing, everything's fine, and that it's just I think it could stand to be a little bit more spend a little more time on the design itself, and that was a successful project.
Thank you, Chris. For which Jay wants to say.
Yeah, just for the record, I want to indicate that I am going to vote against this application because I don't think offering a rooftop gathering place is sufficient reason for the city to grant a height variance. We have zoning for those reasons, because we don't want too tall buildings in our area. I'm also doing it in the hope that you and your client, when you present this to the city council, which you're going to, will at least consider presenting to them an option of this building without the fourth floor elevator and stairwell, which are, fourth floor elevator is not for routine maintenance. It is for people to go up there on a regular basis. And there's nothing more than providing them a social outlet, which I don't think the city should be flouting its own rules and regulations for that. So I just wanted to record why. Now, voting no, you don't know why, but I want you to know why I'm voting no.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Thanks. Vice Chair Bush.
Yes, and Mr. Miller, if you'd like to sit down, please, I have nothing further for you.
Anybody else?
Maybe not, I tried, Mr. Miller.
Will you entertain a motion?
I would just like to, I would like to talk to the residents for a second. Captain, I know your place very well. I watched it enlarge and improve over the years. The gentleman to your left that has left, I know his lot, I know his house. I've turned around in that very tiny place hundreds of times. So I know it very well. Anybody here who might know me knows that height compatibility is a big thing for me too, because I actually live to your north, not very far from where you are. I have been up at the podium hundreds of times. Well, that's an exaggeration. Many times with the city commission talking about compatibility and height compatibility. Mr. Rumpf knows it. I know Amanda. I know Mr. Miller knows it. I'm sensitive to height compatibility. I'm just curious, since I was in one of these seats when it was approved the first time, I'm actually going to ask the audience, because I don't remember this much input the first time this came up. And the only thing, I recognize some of the faces, but not all of the faces. If you came before us in 2018, whenever it was, would you raise your hand? Yeah, I know some of the faces. Okay, that was just for me. I remember more things about going through the commercial property to the north, about driving through there and the way the stop would be and the exit would be there. I have a tendency to agree with the fact that maybe with signage or something there where they won't go down Riviera Drive, there will always be some. I understand that, but to try to stop that might be a way. I just like you to know that I agree. I'm quite sure how I'm going to vote on it right now, but I just wanted to let you know we do listen to you. Contrary to what some folks might say, we do pay attention to what you say, because we've all been there. Thank you very much.
Appreciate that. Mr. Miller, just a couple of quick questions here. The art museum, I think in the past approval, that art was going to be provided by the owner.
Yeah.
Do you have a source for the art now, or is that something that needs to be procured?
I have a ton of colored site plans I could.
Nice PowerPoint slides.
Yeah, that's. I don't think Dr. Eriks has his own art collection like the dermatologist did. Maybe he does, but it's something that we would have to work on that room to find that.
Right. I want to circle back to the height. The stairwell and the elevator seems to be the need for you. If we got rid of the stairwell, put in a roof hatch, the parapet would still be within code. And then that equipment for the elevator could be reduced. It wouldn't be the big maintenance room or equipment room that you have in your design. Is that correct? You would get rid of the accessibility so that it would take some effort to go up there and have smokes or something. It'd be a vertical roof.
Right, you'd be climbing a ladder instead. Let me answer it this way, is that, you know, if those are reduced down, what's before you tonight is actually two votes. One's for the site plan itself, the other's for the height exception. So, I'd like to, I'm hearing where the height exception is going. I'm not quite sure where the site plan is going, but the height exception is that what would happen is it would be just really a consistent line across that top parapet line without the components of it going above it. Are they above for the access? Not denying that a bit. That's how it was designed originally, and what I asked Amanda was a height exception. Once you go, so 45 feet goes to the roof deck, and then you get an extra 5 feet for the parapet, and anything above that, even if it's an architectural feature. So if you do something pretty and nice that's everybody wants, you still have to come back to height exception. I've had that problem with the code.
Right, and I get that we don't want to build just rectangular boxes out there. We try and break up the roof line so it's not just a straight box all the way around. But the need for the stairwell and the elevator maintenance room don't seem to be, you know, you're not hinging on that. And I think that, would you entertain a condition of approval for that? Or I guess you just kill the height exception and move forward with the site plan and then entertain a condition of approval.
Right, and then we would have to modify the elevation.
Maybe you can remind me, but did we do improvements for Riviera Drive in your previous site plan? Were there conditions of approval for that, or was that? Oh, I remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's drainage needs in it, so that section that really runs along the frontage of the property would be modified to help out with the drainage. It didn't touch on the drainage. It is exfiltration, and it outfalls to the catch basin that's in Riviera Drive. We got that confirmed. So the drainage issue now, it's actually going to the right place. It's just that there's no system on the property today, which is, so everything's running to that spot.
I thought I remembered that there was a problem with drainage on the street, and part of your what you would give back to the residents there was to try and grade it into your system so that it could be pushed out to the Riviera and eventually out to the coast.
And a similar one on Harbor called Harbor K that I know.
Am I getting mixed up?
Yeah, I think I'm not remembering that part.
If I may, Mr. Chairman. I think also we even got as detailed as shadows and darkness when we were discussing it the last time about which way the sun went and where the shadows went and where that would go. So we were pretty thorough last time.
It's a good memory. I have the same memory of not as many friends flying.
Yeah.
All right, that's all I have. I also want to commend the public for coming out. We've done quite a few meetings with very limited engagement from the public, whether it's from pandemic or just from, you know, not being seasoned. So I thank you all for coming on. I'm happy to see that you all are you know, getting together for stuff like this and maybe get to know each other a little better. Like I said before, we will vote on this. It does not change. It still goes to the city commission. I know that there's some people that maybe like to think that this board is kind of useless, but we've got decades of experience up here. We're all volunteers. We're all citizens. Most of us have lived here for a very long time. And hopefully some of the questions that we've asked up here and some of the comments that we've had are stuff that you can take and bring to the city commission with you to better help your case. And with that, I'm sorry, we've already had public comment.
It's a question for the city attorney.
Is it something that you already asked earlier and you wanted us to?
No, I just wanted this EPA regulation circumvent Boynton City regulation.
That's something maybe you should bring up to the city commission before they get together. Thank you. All right, at this time, we will entertain a motion, please. If anybody wants to.
Would it be possible to take these out of order?
Yes, I would encourage it.
move to approve the request for a miniature site plan, which is item 7.7B.
You gonna keep it that simple? All right, I would ask that you entertain a condition of approval that the stairwell and the elevator equipment be removed and that the height that be reduced.
Wouldn't that be 7A?
I think you would squeeze into this one because 7A might be on its own. So are we out of order now?
So if we approve that motion for 7A, that
They're doing this one, right? They're doing B.
May I ask for some advice from town attorney, city attorney?
Take them in the order that they appear on the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, can we take 7A with your recommendation to remove the height?
I don't think that would that work as a condition of approval for 7A?
Or is it become moot?
I think 7A is, yeah.
Take 7A first.
All right.
Well, you vote down.
Mr.
Chairman,
my motion. We'll clean this up, I promise. Would you pull that 7B and reduce and do 7A, please?
yes. Move item 7.7A with a request for a height exemption.
I have a motion to approve. Do I hear a second? Second. All right, we have a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Brownie?
Nay.
They didn't hear.
I'm sorry.
I said nay.
You said no.
I didn't hear your name, just call your name.
She did.
She did.
I didn't hear.
Mr. Simon?
No.
Mr. Litz?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. Remicchio?
No.
Mr. Sobel?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Rosencrantz?
No.
My apologies.
For the gentleman, it's Buoni, B-U-O-N-I, if you didn't hear my name.
I'm sorry.
We good?
Well, the clerk should announce what the
Yeah.
outcome is.
So it was a 4-3 vote. 4 no's and 3 yeas.
It's 5 no's and 2 yeses.
May I get a motion to approve the next item, please?
I make a motion that we approve section 7B, the site plan for the construction at 1320 South Federal Drive.
Second.
Can I tag on that condition of approval on that, or is that a moot point, city attorney, Charlotte?
I don't think you need a condition of approval. Based on the vote on
Can I amend my motion subject to the conditions imposed by 7A?
That's not necessary, sir.
Okay, so even though the site plan doesn't include that height, it will not impact if we, on this vote?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the clarification. Okay. All right, I messed that up. Did we get a second?
You got a second.
All right, thank you very much. Let's do another roll call vote, please.
Okay. Mr. Rosencrantz?
Yes.
Mr. Bayoni?
Yes.
Mr. Simon?
No.
Mr. Litz?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
No.
Mr. Remicchio? Mr. Sobel?
Yes.
Four yeses and 3 no's.
Thank you. Motion carries. All right. At this time, if you all want to move on, you can leave. If you want to stick around and hear us talk about the next stuff, we'll do it. We're going to take a 5-minute recess.
I live really close to yeah, they thoroughfare. I bought them where they are. I hear you. Guys, a lot of the stuff we talk to.
Who is he talking to?
Talking to his neighbors.
Oh. Review criteria.
I'm doing these in order, correct? 7D.
Yeah. So review criteria is next. I'm gonna go to the
Well,
restaurant.
I do owe you an apology.
I wanted to get this in the record as my recommendations for conditions of site plan approval. Obviously, it's been approved. I mean, this is new, but I'd like these concerns being, will the city commission read this?
It's going to get into the record, yes. Okay. And we can even make a note of it when we present at the commission. Trying to draw some attention to it, but yes, he did say provide that to you before you
I'm sorry, I didn't have it typed up, but can I get a copy of it for myself? She told me to come over here. I can come by tomorrow.
She suggested you give it to us. Okay, that's fine. Is that what you you did pretty well.
Should I pick it up tomorrow or wait till you get it now?
I won't be able to copy too quickly right now. If you can stop by or
where would I go to pick it up tomorrow? Where's your office?
Well, if you want, you can always, if I know when you come in, we coordinate. Yeah. If you have a speaker, if you have a, I'm sorry, if you find a parking space right in front of City Hall, I just walk it out.
So should I call you when I'm almost here?
Yeah, give me a rough idea. I don't have. Let me just take those. Well, tell you what, let's touch base first thing in the morning sometime.
Thank you for everything. And Bradley too. I'll tell him.
No, he's great to work with. We've worked a lot with him over the years.
We're not trying to be difficult. I didn't even get to say it.
I don't sense that. No, I've seen much more hostile and volatile and irrational residents of the project.
They're nice people. Thank you again. Okay, so I'll call you and we'll figure it out.
We need to make a motion to decline.
You know, I've seen it both ways. I oftentimes wonder that myself. I have heard someone say that if the motion to approve fails, then it automatically is. And Robert's Rules of Orders doesn't have that converse for a denial or something like that. Yes.
How do I know if it's working?
Click stop video.
Those were great.
I mean, I hope it's recording, but it's going dark like that.
We both agreed that we should have put a condition on the site.
Oh, yeah.
Cleaner. If you only look at that, if you only look at the record, it looks like it got approved. No, unless sometimes the condition of approval include the condition that site exception must be approved. Is that this one, you know? Usually we say corresponding applications form must be approved. So there is some process. Maybe some things could get approved, but that's confusing to me. But I guess mandate rules that we needed the master plan up there. There were two separate items. There wasn't one on the agenda.
Yeah, we just like a new master plan modification.
If those need two separate actions, then it should be itemized in the commission agenda as two separate items. It should be. Which is confusing what she said, because land use zoning is still in place, but the master plan technically expired. But historically, we've had land use, we can construe the site plan to be the master plan. So otherwise, all of a sudden, we're in this one period of time where they gave us two plans that are done. Because we all of a sudden started having master plans, which are very small. Not the typical master plan, which has multiple properties and uses. When you have a bubble diagram for master plan, less detail. Our master plan requirements essentially as detailed as a site plan. So it's a little bit, but then we went to a time where we have to allow them to be one of the same.
I look forward to having you over.
Then we allow them to be the same thing. That's what, but the challenge then is we want to have a different approval process to amend one another. They shouldn't be one and the same type of elements. We're talking about site plan and master plan.
Yeah. Yeah, so they should have separately taken.
Yes, well, we should have had it as a different item on the agenda.
Yeah, there should have been 3 items. I saw that too. There should have been 3 requests. And you know, and I don't know if it's like a Novus thing, but like I've done it a lot of times that it's all 7A and then there'll be 3 different requests. Or no, that's always the way I do it. No, because I have to put different staff reports in there. So they're 3 separate items completely. Only
we should
when
make
you
sure
do.
the city commission.
It's, yeah, it has to be separate. Yeah, because we need 3 different development owners. But they didn't need a motion to deny, just the motion fails. Right, so it's just a.
Still looking Robert's Laura. I think I've seen. Maybe I'm thinking different.
Just us now.
You know, it was.
Maybe
Us and Susan.
On that issue about the TV station, I almost wonder whether they should get all 150 members of the IOS to come here and speak.
Oh, goodness.
I said no.
All right, let's go ahead and bring it back into session here. I guess the next item here is 7B, approved modifications to Chapter 2, Article 2, Section 2. Standard applications to revise review criteria for future land use map and zoning amendments. Who are you?
Where's the nameplate?
My name is Andrew Meyer, senior planner. Thank you. Good morning, maybe a few hours. Good evening, Chair and Board. I'm going to present the future land use map and rezoning amendment review criteria. It's basically an amendment to our code to kind of clear up the clean up the code language. I'm going to look at the room.
We have it. Yeah, Brad has it.
So first, just a few quick proposed amendments, just a basic overview. First, we're combining the existing future land use map amendments and rezoning criteria into one set of criteria, as these applications are generally processed concurrently. If you look at the code as it is today, there's a lot of duplication. It's really kind of listing the same thing over twice. And so part of this combination is to just create one set. So it's cleaner, and then if we do make amendments in the future, we're not missing something and creating conflicts in our code. And just to kind of go over this review criteria is how requests for future land use map amendments and rezonings are reviewed against, so whether they're consistent with our code. So it's that set of review criteria to review those applications against. Second of all, we're clarifying the review criteria sections to be more relevant in the assessment of the aforementioned applications. And we're also clarifying required documentation for master plan applications. So basically, the review criteria sections, we're clarifying, because right now there's some of the sections kind of address the same topic, and it's kind of redundant, it's kind of duplicative in that nature as well. So we're kind of clarifying those so that we can have more review criteria that can more comprehensively assess these applications as they come through. Finally, we're updating the threshold for future land use amendments, just so that our code is in line with Florida statutes. Florida statutes revise small or large scale amendments as anything that is 10 acres or above. Previously, now it's 50 acres or above. And so we've amended our code to reflect that. Also, there's multiple review criteria to reflect updated city goals regarding economic development and mobility, consideration of market trends, access to mobility options, and the CRA plan. So we've had a few adoption of plans since, like our mobility plan and the 2017 mobility CRA plan. So really this review criteria has been updated to reference these plans so that any kind of proposals are in line with these plans. Finally, we're updating criteria titles to better reflect intent and introduce location efficiency and heavy commercial. These are we're kind of renaming the sections so that it's more clear what the intent of these review criteria are, so that we can more accurately assess these applications. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions as well as that.
Thank you very much. Public ask questions about the agenda items specifically?
I'm the only person here.
You wish to speak on the agenda item?
Yes, sir. Am I still sworn in?
Yes.
You don't have to be sworn in to speak on this subject matter. It's not quasi-judicial.
Or I can make comments and ask questions, both?
You can ask questions
Related
to the board.
to the what?
And related to the agenda item and questions to the board.
Not to the,
correct,
to the planner.
Hi, Ernest Migoli, 710 Northeast 7th Street, Boynton Beach, Unit 407, condominium. Okay, can you put that back up? Thank you. So here I am, again, before the city attorney, the city planner, and a board, a volunteer board, an advisory board, which I said before, and I didn't mean it out of context, but what I've noticed, regardless of what you vote, the commission doesn't listen to you. I was here one time when you said, oh, we don't want those kind of signs, we don't want this, we don't want that. And then I went to the commission meeting and they said, well, we don't care what the advisory board said. We're gonna just, you voted no, and they just changed it. So now we got massage and steam bath signs all over the city. So it really doesn't matter. And when I look at you all, sometimes you look back at me and say, how can you say that? You know, we have some impact. You know what? I just sat through a whole meeting and you defeated those people. And how did you do it? With a bait and switch. They probably didn't need the elevator rooftop anyway. But all the other problems, the way you set it up on the vote was to say, okay, we'll take away the height and then we'll approve it. But those people talk about 35 other things. And I'm, sir, you really don't have to comment. You know what I mean? I listen to you comment.
Maintain decorum, please. Stay on topic on the agenda item, please.
I am.
No, you're not. You're speaking about a previous agenda item that has already been.
Well, no, as it relates to this. So what I'm saying is, with the city attorney, these boards, advisory boards, as you call it, and the commissioners and the mayor and the planners, they come in, there's no public here. There's no public here except me. Now, whether you believe it or not, I know a lot about what you're doing. And here's what happens. Now you have a planner who works with the other gentleman and the other woman, and they just have all these goals. They put, oh, we want to do this, we want to do that, and you guys just approve it. You don't realize the major impact of these modifications.
Come on. Honestly, we just voted down an agenda item. We just voted up an
No,
agenda item. You
just
cannot come in here and just accuse us of voting everything yes and no. You're obstructing this board. Are you going to speak
I don't
on
want
the
to
agenda
obstruct the
item?
board.
Are you
It's
going
on
to
the
speak on
recording. You said
agenda
I'm
item?
obstructing. I'm going to stop obstructing.
Thank you for your
Accuse me of
comment.
obstructing, right?
You need to speak on the agenda item before the board, sir.
I was, but you said I was obstructing, so I'll stop. And it's on the record. And the lawyer is happy, shaking his head yes.
All right, at this time, I'll entertain any comments or questions from the board. Starting outside in, Jay?
Or not?
Darren?
Yes, real quickly.
Go ahead.
These proposed amendments, would that have affected the WXEL issue that we had this evening? By combining the rezoning and the land use maps and rezoning and whatnot into one item?
No, the combination of that review criteria would have still, it would have had the same level of intensity of review as it would be today. So there wouldn't have been an impact on the review or the determination of that previous item had this been implemented before.
Okay, thank you.
I guess really what on item number 2, to clarify the required documentation for master plan applications, is that increasing the documentation? Is it providing more detailed information, things that were not necessarily part of an application prior, but now they are under the state's adopted?
Specifically, the additional documentation for master planning applications is specifically refers to the request of a bubble diagram. A lot of times these master planning applications come through and they don't have a bubble diagram per se, they just have a site plan. This document is just clarifying when a bubble diagram would be needed versus the site plan. Okay.
Thank you. Tom, any questions? All right, I'll entertain a motion, please.
So move to approve item 7.
Okay, that's what
To approve 7D.
All right, we have a motion to approve 7D. Do I have a second? Thank you, Chris. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, we'll move on to, we'll hear 7E. Jay, we haven't heard it. Yes.
Hello again. Again, Andrew Meyer, Senior Planner. I'll be presenting our medical care or testing inpatient beverage manufacturing group called Taproom Brewery and Takeout Restaurant proposed amendments to our code. Just in summary, this is kind of broken up into 3 different subject areas, if you will. First one is medical care or testing for inpatient, kind of a revisions to that code. The second is the introduction of brewery, microbrewery, brew pub and taproom uses, and also their kind of related winery and distillery components. And then finally, takeout restaurants. So currently in our code, medical office uses are permitted in C1 office professional, the zoning district, and they're compatible with residential daytime operations. So these typical medical uses, they have business hours, 8 to 5, or close to that, typical business hours. However, inpatient uses provide 24-hour client care or testing. So when those uses come forward, currently there's conditional use approval required in that zoning district, C1 office professional, within 50 feet to property line of any use abutting residential. So when a use proposed that's inpatient is within 50 feet of a residential abutting property line, it requires a conditional use. Inpatient uses vary greatly in intensity and potential impact. What staff has seen is that there's kind of a wide range. It's kind of hard to classify it into one type of use. So there's different intensities, different scales, if you will. So evaluation identified lower intensity uses and criteria to allow locational options. So we looked at like the location of maybe some of these lesser intensity uses, how if they're compatible or more similar with like the standard medical office use. Locations include medical use concentrations located along collector streets. So the proposed amendments is lower intensive inpatient medical uses could be compatible if the uses were smaller in size. Provide services or testing that commonly requires less than 24 hours of inpatient stay. So we're not talking about inpatient visits where it's days or weeks. They're very short inpatient visits. And then also visually appear and function similar to conventional office uses. So there couldn't be any impacts or externalities that would be any different from a standard office use. So the types of these uses are commonly referred to one as like a birthing center. So instead of, let's say, somebody going to a hospital and having a child at the hospital, maybe they go with one of these private inpatient birthing centers where they're there for less than 24-hour period, they give birth, and then they go home. So that's kind of the types of uses that this would cover. Our second kind of realm of uses is our brewery, which includes distillery, winery, microbrewery, which includes micro distillery, micro winery, brew pub, and tap room uses. So staff has noticed that breweries producing between 1,000 and 7,500 barrels of beer per year represent the largest growth in the industry and provide a mix of complementary commercial components. These type of breweries are not like your large, distribution type breweries. They're a little bit smaller, and they offer some sort of like say a commercial component. Staff has received an increasing inquiries regarding the establishment of microbrewery, brew pub, and taproom uses on properties in commercial or mixed use. Currently today, any establishment that produces alcoholic drinks falls under beverage manufacturing, which is restricted to C4 general commercial, M1 industrial, and PID, which is our planned industrial development. So what this code amendment proposes is the introduction of 4 uses, and you can kind of see them on the scale here. At the top, which is the most industrial type of use, is a brewery. In the middle is more of a microbrewery, and at the bottom is more of a brew pub or tap room. First, a brewery will be an industrial use, similar to beverage manufacturer, which is how breweries are currently classified, that produces alcoholic beverages. No limits on production, and a commercial component is optional. So similar to how breweries are currently operating within the city. No food services will be allowed. Food services create an additional parking demand that just can't be accommodated by those types of zoning districts. And again, this includes winery and distillery. Our second use is microbrewery, which produces a maximum of 3,000 barrels per year, and it combines manufacturing and distribution of alcoholic beverage with on-site food service. So it's more of a commercial component that's publicly accessible, and a commercial component is required as part of this. And the reason is the zoning districts in which it's located, which will be primarily commercial and mixed use. We don't want solely industrial uses establishing in the zoning districts. We want more of a something that the public can access and enjoy in those zoning districts. And then again, this includes micro distillery and micro winery. Finally, we have the tap room and brew pub uses. These are very similar in that they're both restricted to a maximum of 1,500 barrels per year, and also that anything that's produced on site is only exclusively for on-site consumption. So there's absolutely no distribution allowed. There's no trucks coming or anything like that. Everything they make has to be served on site. The key difference between these rooms is a tap room is regulated currently like a bar use, and a brew pub would be regulated like a restaurant use. So this is a table it's kind of a lot of information being thrown at you at the same time. So here's a table that's kind of outlining the differences between these uses. And you'll notice that a commercial component is required for microbrewery, taproom brewery, and brew pub to, again, retain compatibility with the proposed zoning districts it's in. One key point is that brew pubs, which are similar to restaurants, they're permitted by right in all non-residential zoning districts except C1, and they're also allowed accessory and public use and recreation, and that's going to be accessory to a primary principal use. The rest are going to be permitted through a conditional use. Brewery would be permitted in C4 as well as permitted by right in M1 and PID as a beverage manufacturer is. And then a microbrewery would be a commercial use in all commercial and mixed use districts except C1 and C2 where they're not permitted. And then taproom would be in C3, C4 or higher intensity commercial districts, central business district, planned commercial districts, suburban mixed use, mixed use 2 through 4, mixed use core, and planned industrial district. Finally, our last proposed amendment is takeout restaurants. Staff has noticed a growth in the takeout delivery industry through the popularity of third-party delivery companies. These are like your Uber Eats, your Grubhubs of the world. What staff is, what we've seen is that there's a new type of takeout restaurant emerging, and these are establishments that fulfill orders exclusively from third-party delivery apps. These uses that only deliver through these third-party apps differs from standard takeout restaurants because the customer visits are very brief. They're placing their order on the app ahead of time. There's typically no waiting on site. They're only there really to pick up an order that's ready for them to be picked up. Does not require high traffic exposure. So the way these restaurants are being discovered is through an app or through social media, not through visibility on thoroughfares. And also through like databases, like Yelp and things like that. So currently, takeout restaurants are permitted in M1 if they are along arterial and collector roadways and in a multi-tenant development and they do not exceed 25,000 square feet. What we're proposing as part of this amendment is that they would be permitted in M1 without the roadway restriction, same limits on multi-tenant developments and also size. But they can be permitted without the roadway restriction if transactions are not tendered on site. So they have to be tendered off site prior to the customer arriving on site. That concludes the overview of amendments. Here for any questions as well as staff.
All right, at this time, we're going to open it up to the public. That's okay.
Well, I have a couple of questions.
Anyone from the public wish to speak on this agenda item? I would.
Can we go back to the first slide?
Hi. Ernest Minoli, 710 Northeast 7th Street, Unit 407, Boynton Beach. Okay.
Innovation or brewery?
I'm sorry?
Okay, I'm sorry. This is the first slide. You're right. Go ahead.
So basically, you're looking for approval to change the code, and you're the planner, and it says that medical care or testing inpatient. So in essence, is it that you're trying to allow less than 24-hour service in more locations? Did I understand it correctly? Are you you're trying to expand medical service, correct?
Can you please direct that to the board?
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I correct that this is trying to expand somehow medical care or testing services in various ways throughout the city? Is this a proposed code change or modification to increase and expand? That's kind of my question.
Okay. Is that the only question you have?
No.
All right. Continue on. We'll answer that first.
Well, can you answer?
You have 3 minutes. I suggest you get your comments and questions in now, and then we'll have them answer it.
I didn't know the questions were limited to 3 minutes. Are they limited to 3 minutes?
Chair can limit the questions to 3 minutes. If you'll ask your questions and sit down, the planner or somebody from the planning staff will answer your questions.
Oh, you have to ask all the questions first, and then you sit down.
It's to your benefit. That way you utilize all of your time of the 3 minutes asking your questions rather than us answering. It allows you to ask more questions.
Okay. So my question is there any way that at least the public could know if you're trying to expand something, how it would affect? I mean, who knows what you're talking about? It could be someone who's a doctor somewhere who says, I do a little work in my house and now they want to bring in patients. I don't understand if you could clarify that. That's the question. Now the second is breweries. So am I correct? Is there an effort in Boynton Beach to kind of compete with places like Delray and other places where wine and alcohol and and rooftops and, you know, these things are expanding to the point where how much alcohol do you need in one town? So if I'm not correct, what the planner is asking for is some exceptions so that more of this business can be done in more places with less restrictions. And again, there's 87,000 people who live here who are affected by the sale, use, and possible illegal use of, not that you're planning it, but you do know when people have more access to alcohol in more ways, that they don't always follow the rules. That's all I'm saying.
Plenty of restaurants and bars already in the city.
What? I'm sorry?
Your time is up. Thank you for your comment.
Okay, am I gonna get some answers?
That is the intention of the board, yes. Take a swing at it.
Should I start with inpatient?
Yes, please.
Okay. The question is whether we're expanding inpatient uses in the city. That's not the case. What this amendment is proposing inpatient uses that fall within specific criteria. It's really a waste of staff's time. It's just a very superfluous process to bring it through a conditional use if it meets very specific criteria that we've proposed as part of these amendments. It's already approved conditional use in these locations. However, if the use is very similar to an office use in terms of, you know, how it functions and how it affects the neighborhood, as well as limits on length of stays and everything, the zoning administrator has the option to waive the conditional use requirement for these uses.
And I'd like to make it clear that you're not trying to allow a doctor to perform surgeries or procedures in his home, correct? As the gentleman asked the question.
This would apply to the C1 office commercial or office professional zoning district, which doesn't currently permit residential. So they're, you know,
hopefully that answers your question. There's no doctor is going to be allowed to perform a procedure in his house.
So you did say something about delivering a baby. I don't know what that means.
At a facility, delivering a baby at a facility that's established for that.
I don't understand the answer, but hold on. It's very complicated.
Move on, Andy. Thank you.
The proposed brewery uses, currently breweries in their current form are allowed under beverage manufacturer. And as part of these amendments, we're changing the definition of beverage manufacturer to non-alcoholic beverages. But we're introducing the use of brewery to kind of capture those uses that, you know, want to operate as a brewery first and foremost. So really that's not really changing in that regard. The introduction of tap rooms and brew pubs, again, they're very similar to bar uses and also restaurant uses. The reason for the separate uses is there is that manufacturing component on site, and there are restrictions as to distribution and things like that. We didn't want to lump it just under bars or restaurants. It gets a little muddy, so we wanted to break it out. So it's really accommodating these new types of uses in the city that we really have experienced an increase in inquiries from the public. There's public that are, you know, quite, you know, asking if this type of use is allowed. And so its function is very similar to restaurants and bars, how they currently exist in our code. Finally, the microbrewery is kind of a mix between the fully commercial and fully industrial. It's kind of a mix. This is also a use that we've been receiving inquiries of from the public. And this is more of a use that will be established in certain commercial and mixed use zoning districts.
All right, this time, anybody from the board? Jay? No. Aaron? Tom? Yeah.
Thank you. The takeout restaurants, you're talking about ghost kitchens, right?
Yeah, when staff did research, we did see the term ghost kitchen. It's unfortunately still defined, and it's, you know, we try to sort of stay away from that language.
Well, there's a couple different kinds. Some of the bigger chains, some of their like Chili's could let rent part of their kitchen, and then you order food from an app, from Grubhub, and you don't know where it's coming from, but the Grubhub guy goes to Chili's back door and gives it, that's called a ghost kitchen. There are other ghost kitchens which are full standalone operations where they, again, you order it, pay online, somebody brings you food to you, you don't know exactly where it came from, but it's a new thing. But then, thank you.
All right. Chris?
So that is kind of what this is about.
Yeah, this amendment is really covering kind of the second part of that, and that there's facilities that, you know, because current ghost kitchens just operate out of a restaurant, which is already, you know, has use approval at that point and everything. This is really intended for those facilities that operate solely on apps that people order food, you don't really know where it comes from, but it comes from there. And that's,
and so those takeout restaurants or third party restaurants with the new verbiage is going to only be allowed within an area where a kitchen facility, commissary or similar would be allowed.
what the code is doing is it's
accounting for them now within the verbiage.
It's accounting for these uses, because they can establish anywhere a takeout restaurant is allowed currently.
Yeah.
What this does is it allows them to give flexibility to move in industrial spaces, so that like smaller industrial spaces, because there is a limit on size, that don't necessarily require the high cost of street frontage or that type of visibility. Exactly. And there are parking standards proposed as part of this as well. It's going to be one space per 350 square feet. So they'll still have to meet parking requirements so that it doesn't create an issue.
But the parking requirement of the one per 350 is that staff and the delivery person who's picking up.
Yes.
How's that? If there's somebody that's working there that drove there and he's preparing the food and then the delivery person shows up, the parking spaces are used up. Why would we want to?
I'm not sure.
You're saying they're required a minimum or a maximum of one parking?
The required parking ratio
is
going to be one parking space per 350 square feet.
Right. So what would the minimum size of one of these facilities be? Could it be 350 square feet? Or does the guy who grew up?
Okay. So I can.
I mean, it's does the tent, like, between what the town requires for a kitchen facility, right? Does all the requirements not allow it to fit within 350 square feet? Because then if I said, oh, I met all my building requirements, fire, everything else, and I fit it in 350 square feet, and I've only got one parking space up front.
I can interject. Yes, I understand.
Okay.
So it is a minimum of one per 350, a minimum. And so like we said, that this use is restricted to 2,500 square feet. So at its maximum, you're looking at about 7 or 8 spaces,
right.
8 spaces for 2,500 square feet. The code also has a minimum of 4 spaces required for any commercial use. So even if you're building 350 square feet, you would have 4 spaces. So that's the catch-all. So 4 is your minimum for any commercial space, if whatever is greater, or you're parking at 1 to 350 if you're above that threshold.
Well, what I'm getting at is if there's one,
you always need more than one, right?
Yeah, because what happens then is everybody parks on the street, you go in there, and now if it's near, it's not in a residential area, but because of where you're designated.
There are a number of restaurants that do that are in warehouse areas, and then you go and weave through the warehouse, park your car, go inside, get your food, and come back out.
Right. Okay.
It's not the hot dog ladies on Gulf Road anymore.
Right.
It's guys with commercial kitchens in a section of a warehouse.
Well, I get that part. I just don't want to have like 5 people show up at the same time, now they're parking in the swale on the right of way and damaging plants, and then 4 months after the blaze of the business, now it's just that's all the reason that's. And then along the other question that I did have was on the microbrewery. You had the table. Facilities that microbrewery, where you say like food, where it says commercial component required, yes, for microbrewery. You mentioned about food service is available there, right? So when you showed, was it saltwater that's in the photos, that's a place that is only allowed to have a food truck. They're not allowed to have food within premises, I guess, right? So is that kind of how this would be set up? Like I know Due South is a larger, they're a brewery, they have food trucks outside. So are they not allowed to have food trucks outside anymore under this, or it's the food inside? You know what I mean? Like that's the only little gray area on those two categories.
The microbrewery use would include food service on site. So in the premise, yeah. Okay. So when I did research, I came to the conclusion that saltwater serve their food indoors, but if that's not the case, then I apologize. But the intent of the microbrewery use is to serve food on the premise and not from like a food
You're
truck.
supposed to field verify these.
Yeah,
that's part of the currency.
So it could be themselves producing the food. It could be a third party that they could sublet to. Right? Okay. And then the brewery, which I'm assuming you showed the category. So that showed a photo of Due South. Right. It says no food service allowed, but they do have food trucks outside. So is that still allowed? Like, are we hurting their business by adjusting their verbiage?
Nothing would change on.
So they're allowed to have, they would still be allowed to have a food truck outside, just not within the walls of the.
Exactly.
Okay, yes, on property, not in the parcel. Okay, and then the other one, but the brew pub, that can go into an accessory PU and recreation zone. So does that mean, for example, like up at the beachfront park, where the concession is, that could become somebody that's a brew pub?
Yes.
Ooh, that's interesting. Okay. Right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bush.
Couple of questions, Andrew, and it'll probably bounce between Mike and Andrew. Going back to medical and testing, some of us remember some years ago when drugs were a big issue and Ehrenberg said, you cannot have testing in the same place that they stay overnight, because there was an inside industry going around where they would recommend, the organization would say, we have to test you 4 times a day. And all they were doing was ripping off Medicare, Medicaid, insurance companies and such. Is that not included in this? Does it change anything? Is where I'm going with that, just to make sure we're not stepping on anybody's toes and we're opening up sober houses again or that type of stuff. And I'm not a medical guy, so this is really a question.
No, good question. And it isn't because of leniency in regulations or some change in these types of regulations that has achieved what it has today. In fact, many of our residents here tonight visiting us from Riviera Drive are firsthand observers of what it was worst case. And it's been regulatory, it's been crackdowns, it's been quite a bit that has achieved what we have today. No, that use would not be covered or affected by the changes that are being proposed here. And obviously, they still would have to abide by applicable statutory rules.
The term medical was just so general that I was concerned about that.
And we did in the presentation go through what those, and it might help some of the visitors understand what uses are clumped into this group category. But as Andrew said, this contains a list, and we did create this list based upon what was happening in this industry, anticipating, addressing certain impacts that we were experiencing or anticipated to experience.
Super. Second and final. When it comes to any of the alcohol issues that you've got listed, talking about field testing, have we gotten input from the breweries? Have you gotten input from the microbes or any one of the definitions you have? Has anybody talked to them about it and said, what do you think? That's not meant demeaning, Andrew.
We did consult with people involved in the industry to get an idea of the industry and trends and sizes, and that's how we were able to come to those conclusions.
Okay, I just wondered where the numbers came from.
Yeah.
I and I will acknowledge to that I've been in conversations with people in those industries that there's limitations, like they might want to have the food aspect, but because they produce a certain amount or they have a certain type of business, they're not able to have this
I
other.
was
type of
concerned
business
about
that
it
they want
because
to do.
one or more are going out of business, and I just want to make sure we're not making it harder for them to stay in business. That's all. Thank you, sir.
I think what's interesting, if I may, Mr. Chair,
Sure.
and one of the motivators behind one element of what we're doing tonight, and this was a request, and there seems to be by some members of the public, the opinion that we are the yes division and that we allow everything that comes in that asks. In fact, this is an attempt to meet a request from a restaurant and a brewery here in town to work collaboratively. And we looked at industry standards, we looked at best planning practices, and we could not come to the conclusion that would allow the business model that they wanted. But we did study some of the things that was mentioned here in terms of current trends in restaurants. And we put together something we thought was
You're
best.
basically codifying some of the things that they want.
Well, no, we're codifying what we see as the best practice that is going on that may help them if they modify their business plan to fit, to get them close to these breweries. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. My question was about the takeout places, the infrastructure that's involved with like the grease traps and some of the sewer infrastructure there that has to be for restaurants. That could be something that they need to provide and improve on if they move into a commercial warehouse.
Yes, they would need to make those improvements.
They would still have to meet the health inspection requirements.
And the building code.
So all that would be taken care of. And then I think it's funny that the city thinks that they're gonna actually use those parking spots when they're delivering food. My first 5 years of employment were delivering lunches and dinners, and parking spots are not, they're gonna be swinging up to the front, jumping out, grabbing their stuff.
That's why zebra stripes are there, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I commend you for doing that, so. That's it. Anybody else? Let's go ahead and knock this one out, guys. I'll entertain a motion to approve. Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No, thank you very much. Motion carries. We have other here. We also have comments by members. Anybody wish to make comments? 3 hours and 7 minutes into this. Hearing none, maybe we'll go ahead and have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, all those in favor? Aye.